gonna go over quickly the list that I played. That you know, my
I'm gonna go over
my
quickly
good friend the list Jorg Heinrich played that and I
won
played
the
that
you know,
my
Eternal Weekend
over
Bayou
my good friend
event
the
in
list
Jorg
also
Heinrich
played
that
I
won
played
the
that
you know,
my
Eternal Weekend
my
Bayou
good friend
event
the
in
list
Jorg
also
Heinrich
played
that
I
won
played
the
sound in the background that we don't want. But one second. Yeah, Peter Vanderham also played to top 4 in today's event. So far out of the 2 Eternal Weekends, there's one still, to be decided tomorrow. But out of the 2, we have one elf pilot, myself, making top 8 in the first one, and then 3 additional elf pilots, 2 on my build, and then 1 on the traditional build, make top 8 of the second one. Is So okay. I guess I'll leave this time. I know there's not that many people on yet because I just posted that I'm going live now, so it's kind of unrealistic to expect that. But I guess first come first serve for anybody who's tuning in now. If you have a question about the current list, feel free to ask right now. The only difference between Jorg and my list is he played a crop rotation instead of the third Force of Vigor. So for those of you who are curious, that was a slot that we were actually on the fence for a while, and we had flipped back and forth. I hedged towards the Force because I wanted to improve the lands matchup. Crop is probably a little bit better against the field, but maybe not as good against lands as Force of Vigor is. I think either one is fine. So for those of you curious, Crop was my 76 card, and my 77 card would have been a Cabal Pit. I mentioned this to some people already, but Jorg and I settled on this list. So the 60 was set for a long time. It's what I've been playing in the leagues. I know there's this random, mysterious, counterbalance, Sensei Divine top player, right? That's randomly playing elves. I don't know who they are, but been doing well with this list. And the sideboard is typically pretty flexible. I think the only locks really are, I think Progenitus is just a must because you never know when somebody's just kind of gonna try to quad engineer you. Also, Seize is kind of a must. And then I talked with Adam Wallace before. He likes therapy. If you know you're not gonna miss, or if you're just like a Cabal therapist expert, by all means. I probably wouldn't go under 2 copies of Seize if you want to split the copies, but only because this is a card you want to bring in against the Plague Engineer decks. I think the 3 endurances now are pretty set, and I would say the flex spots. There's probably the Assassin's Trophy I think are good right now. I think the real flex spots are probably the 3 Force of Vigor and the Wasteland. There's not much playroom because we're naturally weak to combo. But I think Force of Vigor is just particularly good in this metagame, just the way Assassin's Trophy is. And then the Wasteland is good, but I wouldn't say it's necessary. Alright, I guess without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into some of the old replays. Actually, yeah. Hey Yiwa, thank you. Yeah, I was. I mean, I guess there's only not too many people here right now, but I guess I'll spoil what happened. I started out the tournament actually 0-1, and then had to win out essentially to make top 8, and initially there wasn't too much pressure because I figured, oh, it's probably not going to happen if I go 0-1. And then as every win mounted, there was a little bit more and more pressure. And finally, I was glad I was able to get through there and to finish 8-1. Yeah, I guess quick spoiler, right? I lose round one and then win out. But we can go over the matchups real quick. We'll start with this one. So our opponent here is on lands, and if I'm doing something that I can improve on, please let me know. This is my first time doing any kind of replay. All right, so we don't know what they're on to start the match. Like there wasn't any prior info on Goldfish on them, so I just kind of. So you can't keep this regardless. Oops. Move this over. So next hand. Yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. If Reclaimer can ever get incorporated into a blue deck, I am a little nervous about it getting banned. Like, the card is just unreal good. And to me, the only reason why it's not the best creature in Legacy right now is because it doesn't really fit in the blue deck. And for me personally, at least, I think the best creature in the game right now is probably DRC. But that's me, right? Because I value consistency. Ragavan has a higher upside against some of the blue decks and combo decks, but it's kind of mediocre against the non-blue decks. A good comparison is Reclaimer and Shepherd. Shepherd, same thing, right? It's like has a slightly higher ceiling. Excuse me, higher ceiling against the blue decks and Chalice decks, but kind of bad actually against the non-blue decks. Like I bored them out like against Goblins, D&T, and stuff like that. Or Green White Depths, another one I think is like pretty bad. Any deck where you can't really attack or go wide is kind of bad for it. All right, so this is a little bit better. So I don't remember exactly what I put back. If I were to guess in the blind, yeah. So that's the thing, right? It doesn't fit in Delver because it's mana intensive. So it had to be any slower blue deck, and it had to be something along the lines of like similar to the land shell, right? Because you're a crop rotation deck. Um, Also, I think there's now a shell where you have crop rotation, Green Sun Zenith, uh, Reclaimer, Once Upon a Time. Those a lot of those cards tend to be like the green cantrip cartel, so to speak, right? Like not all of them go in the same deck, but typically like Reclaimer and Green Sun are in the same deck, or like Reclaimer and Crop are in the same deck, or Green Sun and maybe Natural Order is in the same deck. Green Sun and Once Upon a Time are like the same deck. So it's kind of like the Brainstorm, Ponder, Preordained shell for green decks, which gives green the consistency that some of the other decks don't really have. White has Recruiter the Guard, which helps, and red can play the other Recruiter, Imperial Recruiter, but for the most part, those are a little bit more mana intensive and not ideal. So so for this, I think I put back the Natural Order. Let's see what I did here. Yeah, so that's exactly what I did. And then in general here, right, you have two lands already. You want to lead with the fetch. So that's what I did. And then I'm going to Once Upon a Time. Here, given that we're only have two lands, I don't want to keep the land. I probably take the Reclaimer. Yeah, it doesn't fit in the Delver decks. Although Jarvis, you shout out to him, played it in W6 Ren and 6 era as just another way to tutor Caracas and Wasteland because of Ren and 6 being kind of broken. So I lead with a Reclaimer in the dark here, right? Like I don't know what they're on. So the exploration kind of gives it away, right? Like there's typically only one deck that plays exploration in Legacy. Something here that is worth noting that I think some newer pilots may struggle with the Reclaimer build is they may just default to playing Heritage and Wirewood because if you played elves before, you typically just want to spew your hand. This deck is a little bit different because if you have nothing better to do, it's probably best to just get a Gaia's Cradle. So they loam, and loam and exploration is a problem. I think here, to play around Punishing Fire, I'd probably just bog right now. Well, right, because if you get something else, you don't get rid of the loam. But the Punishing Fire would be pretty bad regardless. Or they have the Lightning Ball, I guess. I think here our hand is not great. I probably just wait and get a Cradle. Yeah, it looks like that's what I do. It's kind of bad for us, right? Like we got rid of their draw engine, but then they have another one. Alright, so they're gonna blow up our Reclaimer likely here. I think here I have no choice but to get a Cradle. Alright, so that so this was bad sequencing by me. So one thing I've mentioned before is my first match of the day or night, I tend to be a little bit sloppy, and what I should have done here to play around the spell bomb is play the fetch, fetch preemptively, play the Heritage Druid, and then play the Wirewood because at any given time I can just grow the Reclaimer. Like here I lose a Reclaimer for no reason. So very, very sloppy, not just a little bit, very sloppy by me. And then because if I sequence it differently, I can guarantee either the Heritage or the Wirewood dies instead. So they have the Blast Zone, which kills their exploration as well. My opponent, I'm not sure how experienced they were with lands, but some of you'll see in the game too, some of the plays that they made were a little suspect in my opinion, and which made this actually loss feel worse, to be honest. So again here, right? Like they had Merit Lage. I don't get why they don't go for it here and they just make a construct. We're pretty much already dead at this point. We're too far behind. I'm just gonna go through it quickly, but the writing's kind of on the wall, especially since Hoof is in our hand. All right, so there's the Merit Lage. Now we're just dead. All right, I'll go to game 2. Oops. Here we go. Alright, I clicked through that kind of quickly, but I mulliganed because the hand didn't really do anything. I had Progenitus in hand. Can't keep this as well, so I moved to 5. Given that I moved to 5, you just want mana. You want to get to natural order as quickly as possible. The correct play here, or keep here, is you put back a land, you put out the Shepherd, right? Because those are the 2 cards that doesn't help you lead into a straightforward natural order. Yeah. So they have a pretty like anytime they have an explosive either Mox Diamond or Exploration start, it can be a little bit problematic. That was quite the draw, and I'm pretty sure I think from what I remember, I pitched the Birchwood Ranger because I want to get to natural order. I think in hindsight, we're actually very far from natural order. If I were to do it again, I actually would pitch the natural order. So like I think the correct play there is we want to just top deck well. So play the Ranger and then hit their mana with the force and the natural order. But we instead did the other way here. So again, I kind of disagree with my play, and now we're like really stuck on lands, right? We're not gonna get to natural order anytime soon. Yeah, now we're getting kind of punished. Although they had punishing fire too, so we're pretty behind regardless. So if I recall, I don't think they. Let's see. So I don't think we know the card in their hand. All right. So here's a mistake from our opponent. We're tapped out here. They should actually main phase the Thespian stage. I don't know the card in our hand. I end up actually playing around a top deck. Map. Not sorry, not map, but like a top deck. Some kind of other artifact like cage or something. So I actually take the 3 damage, which ends up being relevant later on. That's not why I lost, but because I was trying to play around a top deck. Because I want to kill this regardless, and I figure from 9, Punishing Fire is not going to get us. So I probably pitched a natural order here. Yeah. So they made a mistake, right? We should be already dead to Thespian stage, and we're just drawing real poorly here. And yeah. So we're a little bit low on life, and I think here there's an argument to be made to play the Reclaimer because it can survive through a Punishing Fire, at least one. So what's happening now is because they have the second Grove, I'm gonna get Progenitus is not gonna get there in time, which is unfortunate. And like I said, the mistake was not playing the Reclaimer to bait for the this as a magnet for the Grove because if I draw a land, I can natural order anyways. Even if I pay for the Tabernacle tax. And now we're just dead. Yeah. Alright, so at this point, I'm feeling kind of bad about myself. Because in my mind, I was thinking, oh, I probably just punted this game 2 away. It's hard. It's no guarantee I win game 3, but I definitely let one get away in terms of game 2 at least, and did give myself a chance to play against try to steal game 3, especially given that our opponent seemed to be not as familiar with what we potentially can do with our deck because they didn't play around things like Assassin's Trophy and whatnot. Maybe that's just respect for crop rotation and Caracas, but nonetheless, it seemed to me at least that that was kind of a sketchy move. Because if you're not going to play around it when I have open mana, you might as well not play around it main phase. I saw. Okay, so not the best exhibition from me here in round one, and from this mindset on, I was thinking, oh, I guess I don't have to take it as seriously because I likely won't make top eight from here, and at least the pressure was off from my perspective, and I was like, that's fine. I get to enjoy the rest of the tournament. Um, yeah, there's only winning, right? And if I don't win, it's not a big deal. Like, and it sucks that I threw this. Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a good week so far for elves. I mean, I don't want to get into the specifics, but I made top eight. I think three elf players made top eight in the Bayou event, including the overall winner, my good friend Yorick Heinrich, who has put a lot of time into the deck. Probably the second most amount of time behind me in the deck in terms of actual reps. And it shows, right? If I were to have somebody play my deck and my life depended on it, it'd probably be him. So about that, I mentioned this a little bit in my Discord, but the one thing about this build, and I'll bring up the deck list again. 1 second. So the one thing about this build is if you look at the main deck, like what's really weak to sweepers, particularly Plague Engineer or like -1/-1 effects or like Blazing Volley type. Okay, so I want to get into a little bit about that as well. I know Jorg posted that he didn't play against any Ragavan, and I know some people are saying, oh, that's maybe a blessing in disguise. I actually think it's quite the opposite. I actually myself went 4-0 against the Delver players. So, I mean, spoiler alert, I guess, right? Yes, Ragavan, you just don't even care about it, really. You let them attack you a few turns. If you're really low on life, maybe you consider blocking, or if they're down on cards, maybe you consider blocking, but I actually think you're not playing against the blue-red players, not necessarily a bad thing, and not necessarily a good thing either. Like, I'm not saying you will win every matchup against your Delver, but I did. Like, I went 3-0 against blue-red and 1-0 against Just Guys, so keep that in mind when evaluating, you're not playing against Ragavan. It's not necessarily a good thing that he didn't play against it, so to speak. Okay, so there you go. Shop. Andrew, I think it is saying that he's 6-0 against it in league. So uh, take that for what you will. Like most people I know, if you are blocking Ragavan, you're probably doing things wrong. Like I'm not saying that in Magic there's no such thing as never, but most of the time you generally don't want to block it. So I want to get into that. Like the end of festivities is the replacement right now for Blazing Volley, and if you look, and there's gonna be, let's just say there's an uptick tomorrow in Plague Engineer or like end the festivities. If you look at the deck, like how much of the stuff actually dies to Plague Engineer, for instance, like Visionary cantrips. So you're breaking parity already. Against the engineer decks, the control decks, you're boarding out Heritage Druid. So really, the only thing it hits is Alsor Shepherd. And I actually have a great image from earlier today from Yorick, actually. He sent me right before he was about to win the event. There's an opposing Plague Engineer on the other side of the board, and it just didn't really matter. Now, again, against End the Festivities out of Blue-Red Delver, you do keep your Heritage Druids in, and it hits Wirewood. The thing is, unlike Engineer, if you bounce your creatures, they actually live to the next turn, right? So let's see. So shout out to Mental Misstep, who's in the house. He won the first Eternal Weekend event, which is the Wasteland event. So the Elves player I beat in top eight. My opponent attacked with Korean into. So was there a second Elves player in the top eight? I'm confused because I thought there was only one. Unless I'm wrong. One second, let me check something. So, oops. Yeah, so Stefan. As far as I know, there's only one. I was the only Elves player in the top eight. Exactly. So maybe it was along the way to the top eight because, unless I'm mistaken, I thought you played the mirror. I thought you played Daniel in the top eight, and then I believe you played. What is it called? The person I lost to the green white depths player in the top four. But yeah, the thing is like you typically don't want to trade with the Delver creatures if you can avoid it. Oh, no worries. Yeah, I kind of figured. So what Stefan's referencing to is like, typically speaking, you don't want to trade your creatures with the because your creatures are typically more valuable because the mana growth is exponential and the mana growth with a Ragavan is more linear. The other thing is the exception to the rule is like if you're already ahead on cards, then maybe you trade a Visionary that already cantripped with the Ragavan. The one creature I will often trade with is DRC. I find that to be the most problematic creature only because it fuels not only Murktide but multiple Murktides potentially. So you potentially have to answer more than one Murktide, which is maybe how you lose a game because the first one is typically not a problem. If you're having to answer like the third one, you eventually run out of removal spells. And the reason why I'm on 3 Assassin's Trophy right now is because I want all my removal live against Murktide. That's probably the only way you lose a game. Okay, no worries. Yeah, Elves is trendy pick in the second Eternal Weekend, and then I ran hot, admittedly, to make top eight in the first event. Like, I don't know if you caught it earlier, Stefan, but I lost round one and had to win out essentially to make top eight. It was yeah. So I lost to the depths player that you beat in the top four. Uh, I probably punted so spoiler in game three, but I don't want to do if what should have could have been, but because I think making the top eight already was probably already a little bit fortunate on my behalf, given that I had to win eight in a row. Exactly. Not to mention because we have the single most powerful card arguably in Legacy, like in terms of power levels perspective, and definitely in the matchup. But let's go to round two. So I punted against this kind of shaky lands player that did play around the Assassin's Trophy, but my fault for not baiting the punishing fire so it's kind of funny, right? Like I died with exactly lethal when I could have won next turn. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. Let me close this for a second. So where did it go? I guess that's fine. I'll just click on this. Oops. Looks like only 59 players so far for Sylvan Library. Round two. Yeah, so it's hard to lose the Delver. Murktide is one of the ways. I think my opponent was on Thoughtcast, if I remember. So for those of you who don't know, this is like one of the best things to happen to elves in the metagame because of two reasons. They basically help with they're a predator for your predators. So what I mean by that is they tend to be very good against combo and they can never beat you. Like it is almost impossible to lose this matchup. So we'll start. So yeah, it's good for multiple reasons. I think like Especially we're the deck with main deck collector oof too, right? I don't know they're on but I don't know they're on 8 cast for what it's worth. It just randomly had the oof in hand because this hand is like sort of playable. I don't like to mulligan too, by the way. So they move to 5, which definitely helps. So one thing, exactly, like their chalices, their fouls, their force of negations. Like you have, 4 shepherds that just invalidates 12 cards right there. Also, you have 4 green suns that they have to. They're either down a card in the trade or just accept that their future disruption is just blanked. But yeah, conveniently with a natural oof, right? Like better lucky than good. So one thing I want to notice too is some of you may notice this fake X whale username. I made this account actually weeks ago just for fun because Will and I are in the same reclaimer chat and we just jokingly said, "Oh, this would be a funny alt, right? Like people will think I'm playing a Force of Will deck, which would be nice because especially in leagues, people have recognized who Sensei's Dividing Top Counterbalance is and who Hello Newton or Scooby Loo are. So they tend to mulligan to like the turn 1 against me, and while that's probably the smart play for them, I don't find that very fun to be honest. Not that I'm complaining on what they're doing. You do what you gotta do, but to hedge against that, you either have 2 choices, right? You either play other decks, which I don't really want to because I just think Elves is. I mean, I'm biased, obviously. I think it's at least the second best deck in Legacy, with a good first deck matchup, right? But so I didn't really want to change. So the option is just make more screen names, or just live with the what is it called? Live with the fact that they're gonna have a slight advantage, game 1. I agree. This matchup is better than Old Death and Taxes, and I think if I were to rank in terms of easiest matchups right now, it's probably the easiest. And second, I think I would probably have like 4C control or something, and then D&T is like third. Yes, yeah, so they just like auto lose the oof, right? So I hit a land. So now everything is easy, right? Like we just play around force where we're just gonna go shepherd into oof. I think if we didn't hit a land there, which this card is incredible. It's the Green Ponder for those of you who don't know. And a lot of people want Ponder banned, so like take that for what you will. So we don't really. I mean, this card is like pretty bad against us. It's extremely slow. And suddenly they are locked out, right? Like they can play a few dudes, but you're at 19, probably not gonna matter. I think this matchup is like fairly trivial. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it. So we just bog them so they can't get another Thopter. But again, like I said, the clock is anemic. Like so some sequencing tricks by me. I don't want to get into that too much. Like that's a mechanical thing. I leave that to users to figure that out on their own because it's more just gold fishing. If you don't know all the ways to generate mana with Symbio, like I don't think you're at a level of proficiency with elves that is good enough to win yet. And I don't mean to be like brutal on that, but it's just a reality. Like you can't afford, in my opinion, to waste brain power on little things like that because over the course of the tournament, this is already a difficult deck. That kind of stuff you don't want to have to waste additional brain power and blew their own cage to unlock. Yeah, I've had like some chalice players, play their EE into a chalice and things like that. I mean, you see this more from like the Hull Breacher versions, but you never know, I guess, right? But here, I think we just have lethal. So yeah. It's like 1,000,000 damage. I don't think there's time to go to the next one. I don't think there's anything too interesting about this. Like especially game one, they can't really beat like the kind of hoser Green Sun target. All right, so the best possible, right? We're running haymakers in our sideboard when we drew them. Like this card is just the nuts, and so is this. So conveniently have the cage answer. I think here I probably leave with a reclaimer because you just want to be able to generate more mana turn two. That's my guess. That's what I did. Yep. So quick comment about Torpor Orb. This card is played a lot at the moment as like a one or two of because of DNT. Um, if you have it like in Delver against elves, you probably bring it in, but it's not great. Like the elf player can win easily through this. It's funny too because Stefan, I didn't even know he picked up the deck until after I saw the user Fluffy 21 post on my Discord that they played against Reclaimer Elves in the top 8, and I know he didn't get paired against York, so I was like, wait a minute, there's a third Elf player in the top 8? And then it occurred to me, yeah, that PVGH was on Elves, and he didn't play an exact list of what Jorg and I played, because Jorg and I played more or less 74 out of 75, right? The only card was the 75th card. He chose a crop, and I was like leaning on the fence. Crop was 76 for me, but I played the third Force of Vigor just as I just want more haymakers, right? Against I wanted to short up the lands matchup specifically, and crop is decent also against lands, but I think I just wanted the haymaker. I told York too. Like he asked me, "Oh, is crop okay?" I said, "Yeah, I think crop is perfectly fine. Like I have no problem with him playing the crop over the third Force of Vigor. Also because it helps the Doomsday matchup, which we'll get into that again later on. This is round 2. Yeah, it's medium. I sometimes it's annoying, but I've had it, kind of do nothing a lot of times too. So it's our turn. We're just obviously gonna play the Cradle, and then we're gonna play a creature, and then let me try to think what I did. I think I might have hard casted the Force of Vigor actually. Actually, no, I take that back. I think. Okay, let me see. From my perspective, I feel like maybe I just want to hit the. No, this is not relevant yet, but maybe hitting this will be later on. So I think getting the oof is more important here. Yeah, so I end up doing that, right? I thought about it. I was like, that's probably the correct play, and um, I played. I've told this to most of my streams. If you want to catch me off guard, round 1 is probably the easiest because that's when I play probably the loosest, and I lost round 1 probably because of that. Like I didn't play very well. Game 1 probably was losable. I was gonna lose anyways, but game 2 was definitely winnable. Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't. I mean, like because you're gonna get Archon in this case anyways, right? So I just attack. So here I'm kind of glad I didn't use the Force of Vigor, right? Because they have 2 orbs now. They kind of just like, double hidden themselves for no reason. So here it's kind of like nice, right? I can do everything in one turn. I can force, hit their land, hit their cage, and now they're just like probably just dead in the water. Like it's pretty much game over. Like this matchup is just not fair. I think. Like I sent this screenshot to my group chat, and it's funny too because when I realized I got paired into this matchup, I straight up said, "Oh, I got the bye this round," and that's exactly what happened. Like a lot would have to happen for you to lose this matchup, in my opinion, because it's almost like the old DNT, right? They have no clock, their disruption just lines up really poorly, and you just have like a million haymakers against them. I think this is like not too. Uh, so no, because this on artifact is just like nuts, right? Like you don't want three fatties. I never have three fatties. Round three. Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned that, Chris. I think it's Chris, right? Chris Ross. I'm gonna bring up my sideboard real quick. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff people already know. So, like, I don't think I'm like, giving away, secret intel or anything like that. But here's the Urza Echo matchup. I'm boarding out Visionary too. So really, they hit like two Visionaries and a Hoof, and Hoof is not even that important because Archon is just as good. So pretty bad sideboarding, I think, from our opponent. Our opponent is Salty Ninja here. I believe they're on Jeskai Delver, but I don't remember off the top of my head. Okay, yeah, good to know, Chris. All right. So pretty decent hand. It's a little bit vulnerable to Wasteland, but you do have the second land in Arbor, so I would probably keep. And they mold, so that helps. Oh, okay, never mind. I take that back. This is a Reanimator player. So immediately I kind of dread this, right? Like, yikes. They have Chancellor, which means Reclaimer's online now turn 3. And in most cases, you're not going to get there. Like, you just assume they have the turn 2 at minimum. So, typical thing, right? You just run out something you don't care about, which is probably the Heritage here, yeah. Yeah, so Stefan mentioned something that's pretty accurate. Hitting an endurance, which is now a 4x, one in the main, three in the sideboard against elves is pretty big because, like I mentioned earlier, the only way you lose the game, in my opinion, is because of Murktide. Like you can handle almost everything else, like especially if the game goes late. But if you're the Delver player, keep in mind you will get blown out every once in a while because they will flash in the endurance and you just don't have the removal or the force backup, right? And you can't just give the elf player infinite time, in my opinion. So while it can be good, you have to just accept you're gonna get blown out every once in a while, which I've done to like certain players. I don't want to throw anybody like embarrass them, but I'll put it this way: I had one opponent tell me, "Man, I wasn't sure about Torpor Orb, but it looked like it pretty much backfired against me because I think it was a Jeskai build and they ran their Containment Priest into it, which is pretty devastating, right? Like you lose your hate piece. The elf player, just threw away, put 3 power on board and just threw away probably their weakest card. All right, so we're pretty much just dead, right? Like I don't even know how much beyond this I continue. Okay, I conceded. Again, Reanimator matchups. This is not real Magic. When I say that, it's like not in the traditional sense. Like, my history with Reanimator is I will always lose game one typically. I will always lose game one typically, but if you know anything about my list, 4 Leyline is not uncommon for me to play historically, and if I have a friend who plays elves only on paper, and he's actually the guy that got me into elves originally back many years ago. Like I think it was like 2013 almost or so. He was like the person I would ask for tips and things. So shout out to John Hardival, who's still going to my LGS out there, but he doesn't play online. So he has a sick foreign foil elf deck that's pretty sweet, but he will joke if Reanimator players don't want to play Magic, well, we'll give them non-games with Leyline. So, little tidbit there. Unfortunately, the list I ran today, I took the gamble that I would be okay without Leyline, and it is. It's happening. Actually, maybe it happens later on. I don't remember. I talked to and shout out to Levi. Leviathan 102, who top aided the Vegas event today, but he was the one that convinced me that while we lose some percentage points, we probably can beat Reanimator without Leyline, which is saying a lot historically speaking because one of the all-time worst matchups for elves historically is Reanimator. Um, and Reanimator has typically been a thorn in other combo decks side, historically speaking. So let's go to game two. Not much interesting there. You expect to lose game one to Reanimator. Sometimes you get lucky and you just have the natural endurance or the once upon a time hits endurance. This is like pretty insane, right? Like you have the Thoughtseize turn one with endurance backup. And if the once upon a time hits a Reclaimer, which I believe I did, it's just even nuttier, right? So let's take a look. Yeah, I hit the Reclaimer. There's an argument to be made for the second endurance, but I think you want the onboard threat. Like, if you untap with Reclaimer with 2 lands, the game's over. Like, you just have to fade drawing your bog, right? Oops, let me see what I read. Alright, so I reveal Animate Dead, Reanimate. So the easy take is Entomb. I don't think I have to explain why that's the take. So we're fortunate to draw the land here. And then... Oops. And we just play both our dudes out, right? Because if they go for it, we hit them with the Visionary. But essentially, we will... The way I board it here against Reanimator, and it doesn't show, but I actually board out the Glimpses. And this is like new way of thinking now. Like this is one of the innovations that I've come up with is ever since I went to the Endurance in the sideboard as a 3x in the sideboard and 4x if you include the main deck card, because this card is insane because it's a fair card against Delver that actually doubles as combo hate. And ever since I went to 3 of them, I've realized it's very awkward for sequencing because against the graveyard decks, you want to be able to hardcast the Endurance or leave mana up for a Reclaimer. And what I've been doing is, and it's worked out really well, is taking out the Glimpses actually because it's terrible for sequencing purposes. And instead, you just hope to top deck Natural Order and 1 card combo win the game against them. Alright, so they don't have the kill. Otherwise, they walk into it anyway, so it doesn't matter. Alright, so we just drew another Haymaker. I know there's some contention about Once Upon a Time in Elves. Without getting into too much, because you have such bombs like Endurance, Reclaimer, Shepherd, and then in the fair matches, Wirewood and Visionary, and just not to mention Gaia's Cradle, I just think the card is just too good not to play. I'd rather play 4 than 2. I'll put it that way. And I think 3 is the sweet spot, at least for now, because you don't really want to draw 2. But there is like a small percentage of me that believes even maybe 3 is not the right number. Maybe we're just, the Ponder players back in the day with Miracles playing 2 Ponders. Right. So Glimpse sucks anyways when you sideboard a lot out. So I just think it just felt so much smoother when I did that. And typically speaking, in the Endurance matchups, I tend to not like Glimpse for those reasons. Alright, so, we're just going to attack and then, leave up Reclaimer essentially the rest of the game. There's no reason really. So a lot of people will see this and think, oh, it's kind of like a Death Rite. It's kind of like... I kind of compare it to like a Stoneforge Mystic. And the reason being is because every time you untap with it, it just gets progressively worse for your opponent. Because you leave up 2 mana. If your opponent doesn't do anything, you continue to build your board state, is what I mean. So it has like a Stoneforge Mystic play patterns to it. And Stoneforge Mystic is one of my favorite cards, by the way. Again, I'm just playing everything out. Like, they are under a ton of pressure and a ton of disruption. It's almost impossible to lose from here, to be honest. Alright, so we just have to kill. There's nothing to really... Alright, so it's over here. Alright, game 3. Typically, historically speaking, game 3 is the hardest game to win because you're on the draw now, right? You expect to lose game 1. You're probably pretty favored game 2 because you just have a million pieces. And not to mention, the 4 Reclaimers are live game 2, whereas in game 3, they're not really something you can rely on by itself. It's like secondary hate for game 3. So we were fortunate enough to open with multiple pieces of disruption here. Um, it's really only one, and this is like half because it's good against their faithless looting. But I think it's still good enough to keep because you can always bluff reclaimer activation, and unless they have discard, they can't really afford to play into it. So they have Chancellor. Here, I'm kind of hoping that they actually go for the turn one because we have the blowout, right? They go for the turn one, we crack the Once Upon a Time and Endurance in response. But that's not what happens. But they did have the Faithless looting, which lines up perfectly against our Bog. And there's no reason to play the Once Upon a Time yet because just like you have to think of this as a cantrip because just like Ponders and Brainstorms, there's no need to play it out here when you can have more information later on at a useful time, right? Okay, when they tap 3 there, for a split second, I was scared that was show and tell. I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna lose to that. And then when they played this, my first gut reaction is, oh, the game is over. We won. Because this lines up so poorly against Wirewood. So here, I'm just using the Once Upon it to crack the Chancellors. And then I'm going to just slam down the Reclaimer. Like, we can take 2 hits and just not even care about this card. From my perspective, maybe the opponent doesn't know the matchup, but I don't think you can afford to bring this card in against Elves. Because you'll see what happens. So here we have not only the Reclaimer, so we have the Endurance live in case they go for it. They attack, I don't think we care. We want the Reclaimer live. I mean, at least Tinfin's, at least the Mentor Clock is fast. Like, Regisaur just makes no sense in my opinion here. Like, not only is it just chump blocked, like, Wirewood just completely invalidates it. Alright, so they Entomb here, and somebody mentioned it earlier. Entomb with Endurance is really fun. So what I do here is, I'm going to pitch the Heritage for tempo, so I can actually get the Dried Arbor out of my deck still. See, I think for a split second, I actually think about hard casting it, but I think the tempo is more relevant. Not to mention the deck thinning, and I probably value deck thinning more than the average person. Alright, so another savage draw, right? Like, alright, so this is kind of a cool line. Like, not only does it line up poorly against Wirewood, I could, but then that's me wasting the endurance, right? Like, it's only good if they thought seize me and then I do it myself. Um, so what I do here is I just like, this is if you don't know this trick, this is the new Quirion Ranger Dried Arbor combination, except you're doing it with Reclaimer. Reclaimer, essentially what it does is, at least in my build, between Reclaimer and Once Upon a Time, I'm not saying Quirion Ranger is no longer good. It's like still has a high floor. It's just not needed, if that makes sense. Like, I value Quirion Ranger significantly higher still than like a Nettle Sentinel, for instance. And if like, before the printing of Allosaurus Shepherd, I played 4 Quirion Rangers. I think the card is perfectly fine. It's just, in this day in Legacy, you want to play the best or highest impact cards, and while Heritage Druid is typically worse than Quirion Ranger against the fair decks, it's significantly better in the unfair decks. Yeah. So here I get a Wasteland, right? Just because I can. But it's already over. So yeah, believe it or not, something that's happened is they may recognize Quirion Ranger with and Bayou and not wasting, but a lot of people will waste with Reclaimer up and will target the Cradle, and that is just a full-on blowout, right? You're just 0 for 1 yourself. I guess You trade 2 mana for one, but I mean it's a pretty big blowout otherwise. Oh, that's a good point, Andrew. I missed that myself. Yeah, that's a good point. I definitely missed that. So we'll have a count here, right? Well, this is one misplay. Well, I didn't feel like I made any major egregious errors between rounds 2 and 9. I definitely know I made a misplay in round 1. I mean that was obvious earlier by not playing the. I think probably also I was pretty comfortable with this board state already. I probably took the foot off the gas pedal a little bit, so in my defense a little bit. But yeah, let's see. One misplay so far. Let's keep a track. Between 2 and 9. We'll see how much we can catch because I don't think there was many. I think it was some of the tightest Magic I played in quite a while. Um, I know I misplayed round 1, and I know I probably had a misplay in the top 8. But I think let's see how many misplays we can count between rounds 2 and 9. But that's definitely one right there that I missed the line. Probably got a little bit too excited with the endurance blowout too, right? So we're on round 4 now. We have some characters in the next few rounds as a fun spoiler. So Rock Nation, they typically play like some kind of like snow control historically. I think I just assumed that they could be on anything, or like I kept a generic hand against them. This is not keepable, and any guesses why? Typically, the hands where you have glimpse, you want mana, and this hand doesn't have any mana, so it's just almost like a mode of 4, right? Because this is a mole, this is a mole, this is a mole. This is like a mole. This is like a mole of 3. Yeah. This is not great, but significantly better. And I'll let everyone in on a secret with elves, at least for me, at least. I will keep somewhat shaky hands because I don't like to mull, unless I have to, absolutely have to, because elves is a critical mass deck and it's very hard to win on like a mode of 5. Yeah, you can, but it has to be like all 1 drops or something like that. Andrew. I kept this even though it's not great because I didn't want to go to 5, and I figured they may have removal, and then the good thing about fetches and why they're broken is they represent arbors, right? Like they're more creatures. So I figured I could massage this and maybe convert this into a playable hand. So the hand got significantly worse with a block. So when they brainstormed here, it is. I was a little bit scared. Anytime somebody end steps brainstorm against me, I just think combo. But because that's typically, and then I just die, right? But luckily they weren't on combo. Um, Also, I'm very happy about this trade. Like in fair matchups, Heritage tends to be the worst creature because you need 2 other creatures for it to do even anything. It's the reason why I built the deck the way I built too. You don't really have too many cards relying on other cards to be good. They're all like standalone good. Like Visionary standalone good, Wirewood standalone good, Reclaimer is like the most insane standalone good. Shepherd kind of relies on other people, but the upside's so big that it's still worth it, and it's a removal magnet. And it's like good with natural order, right? You just force that over and people lose. Heritage is the one card that still is kind of bad with that needs other cards, but it's why I like remove some of the other cards in the deck because, like Nettle Sentinel for instance, I just in today's Legacy, I don't want my cards to be only good when other cards are good, like are in play, and I want to make it this version of the deck very hard to hate out. And for anybody who Well, I can show the screenshot later, but essentially Yor won through a plague engineer in the finals. So I'll leave it at that. How resilient this deck is. Yeah. So if they're casting removal spells, especially on a heritage druid, I don't really mind that much. And then here you play the arbor, right? Ideally they hit the heritage again. So this time they hit the arbor, which is smart. Like you want to cut the elves on their mana. That is a horrendous draw. So I end step fetch and I have a natural order coming. I don't think I can wait because this hand is not getting better. I'm just gonna slam natural order here. Like if they have it, they have it. Like I don't think I'm winning this game otherwise. So they try to dig for it, and by this, when they played the channeler and then they put the Narset, I'm a little bit confused because I was thinking maybe this is like a mid-range version or something. So maybe they don't have days, right? Like, and luckily the Archon lives. So at this point, I'm just thinking, I have the Bog in hand, which was a terrible draw, but now I have to clench essentially for one turn and hope they don't have the Murktide. If they don't, I think we win this game. Like outside of something random like Teferi, which I ran into a player who had that, but like it's more fringe, right? So when they iteration here, I said, oh, we probably have this game. So they have the Wasteland, right? So I know they're still lower to the ground. That's like free information for me. This is actually a pretty cool thing that you can do. I'm going to attack with the Arbor here. And if they block, I get to eat their Channeler as well in the trade. So this is significant because the way I mean, it's already very unlikely. But the only way they can get back into this game is if they mill a bunch of cards. We do. We do, Andrew. The reason, so like I said, the only way they get back into this game is because they have to mill a bunch of cards to get to a Murktide to stabilize the air because this wins pretty quickly, right? Like, and I was fortunate enough to get them to block. So they block here. I know there's no instant speed like tricks or whatever. So there's one damage already. Now I can just play my Reclaimer and bog them, and then they lose their Channeler. Like if they have double Channeler, that's one way to get or even single Channeler, one way to get a Murktide online, like after the bog. So the iteration, and for me at least, I think the game is likely over already from here. Like we just needed to essentially not die, not have an opponent cast the Murktide in that one turn we were weak window, and luckily they didn't have it. And we were fortunate enough to win this game because this was a horrendous. Like we drew pretty poorly, like overall. They just happened not to force for natural order. Sometimes natural order can do that, right? It's like your bailout card. So here they made a Murktide. If I were them, I'd probably wait a turn, right? Because it can't even trade with the Archon right here. Yeah. So I think that was a small misplay on their behalf, right? Like, what is the point of making a 5/5 Murktide that can't block the Archon? Pretty like it's got lands and spells, and typically that's a key for elves. All right, so Cage is a pretty good turn one play. It already shuts off one card in my hand. I think here I probably, if I were to guess, lead with the They have white removal, so it doesn't really matter. So I think I'd probably lead with the Reclaimer here. Okay, never mind. I think what I did here was I led with the Shepherd because I value the Reclaimer over it because I want the Cradle later on. So that makes sense actually. So they had, yeah. I'm expecting these Delver low to the ground white decks, or really blue red, but splashing white for removal or superior removal, I guess, right? I'm expecting like 8 removal spells. So like typically I lead with the worst things. Yeah, it is what it is. Like I think this game got real grindy if I remember. So here I'm playing around days. Like I saw Wasteland out of respect, and there's just really no reason to run into a daze for no reason. And then yeah, this green sun hand's looking worse and worse, right? You cannot Zenith for Grist through Cage. Only Priest because of the way it's worded. So we fortunately drew the bog. We were again a little bit vulnerable for a split second there, and then now shored up the vulnerability, so to speak. Right? It's like think of it as like a cyber attack, right? You want to shore up the vulnerabilities, like the graveyard being the biggest one, and then that's respect for the containment priest. Like it is not worth losing this just because of one damage. Worthy. I wrote an article about this, and I think it's a good enough article that because I had, for those of you who know Rumcore Inigo, he thought the article was really good, even for people who don't play elves. It's basically about who's the beatdown, and against these Delver temple variants, they're the beatdown, you're the control. So you absolutely, absolutely cannot. So the damage doesn't really matter, is what I'm saying. But it's not worth losing this visionary because of like a snapcaster or something like random, or like a containment priest more likely, right? Because this is a lower to the ground deck. They likely don't have snapcaster mage. All right, so here I think I play a land and probably just pass. Well, actually, let me think. I take that back. Yeah. So endurance doesn't do anything here. I think what I end up doing is I trophy the cage, see if they force with 5 mana up. If they do, it is what it is, and then you just attack. But if they don't, then you can green sun for 1. I think is what I did. And if they flash in containment priest, I probably just trophy that anyways. Was my logic at least. All right, so they double dazed here. So they use daze as force essentially. So they got a Murktide. Luckily, it's not too big, so the clock is kind of slow. There's a fine line with Murktide against elves because you want it big enough to actually be a real clock. Like, there's no point of making a 4/4, right? Like, an elf player is gonna kill you before that matters. But if you wait too long, especially against my version of the deck, or just even against the traditional build, there's still endurance, right? Like, you have to be aware of like Bajuka Bog, which is already played admittedly, or like a reclaimer for Bajuka Bog or something like that, right? Like there's a kind of a it's almost like a tuning process, right? You want to go underneath the graveyard nukes, so to speak, but you don't want it to be too early where it's like irrelevant, right? Okay, so I clipped the reclaimer. I don't remember what else I saw off the Once Upon a Time, but this is generally pretty good because of Cradle, regardless. So the reason why I fetched there in the face of Wasteland is because I don't want to draw the card. Like the damage, I don't think is gonna matter. Like either I answer the Murktide or I don't, in my opinion. So here, I still have a little bit of time. They're hellbent already, so that's good to know. If I need to, I can just like chump block with endurance later on. But I'm not quite there yet. I think I'm just gonna start drawing cards and just like try to drown them in card advantage. So sorry, I had the answer for the Murktide. I might as well untap with it, and win the game, right? Because there's no way they're trading the channeler there, and then the game is probably over. So there, I'm playing around, um, what's it called? A top deck Murktide. Yeah, this matchup is like close to over already. So a lot of times in the fair matchups, Birch Lore is even better than Heritage because you get your return on investment almost immediately. Whereas Heritage, like your opponent has more play to it because they don't have three creatures total. That's not good enough. I'll just let it resolve or something. Whereas this, they have to answer immediately. So here I'm just trying to like extract as much value as possible. In my mind, I'm thinking the game is already done. Really, like you have some huge reclaimers already on board, and the wire would protect at least one shepherd, and you just have grist and just like a whole bunch of other stuff. So static. So our opponent drew really well. Like for those of you who think there's not a lot of elf hate, like I mean, what did we see earlier? I forgot what we saw, but yeah, the Staticaster is like pretty good. The Staticaster was actually quite annoying there too because I can't actually bounce something and then Assassin's Trophy the Staticaster this turn, so it actually gets another well, not another free creature, but it makes me less efficient on mana. And they probably kill the Shepherd if I remember correctly. So they take the Grist off the board. Like they drew pretty well here. I still feel pretty good. We have like a ton of cards in hand. They get the Torpor Orb out, which is kind of annoying, but still fine. I think from here we have to handle the Staticaster. I'm like debate. Okay, so my natural blue instinct is I want to kill the orb because I want to draw 3 cards with Visionary. The problem is this is gonna take over the game. I have to answer this right now, and I think eventually I, take my medicine, so to speak. So them attacking here, being forced to attack is kind of funny, right? They can't even block, and then it's over because, yeah, it's 1,000,000 damage. All right, so that was round 4. Round 5 is the character that I am referring to, and I'll show you why. This person is quite the character. So what happened here was I Googled my opponent and they had no results. Um, the first thing I think is, maybe they're on combo. That's my thought process, right? And then this hand is not great, admittedly. And this is probably the one thing I regretted. I should not have probably relied on that and probably just mulliganed this hand. This hand is not very good. I was just thinking, maybe they're on like Reanimator or something, or like Oops, because they didn't have anything on Goldfish, and I thought maybe they're on combo. In hindsight, that was a mistake. Oops. But we'll see how I played this out. I got punished too. I lost this game. Yeah, see, you this don't be like me. Don't keep hands where you can't make mana. That's how you lose games against with elves. Typically, okay, so every once in a while this will happen. They'll hit a reclaimer or they'll hit a visionary, and you'll think, why me? Like, we're just so far behind here. Not because of the rag event, because we hit missed land drops. Alright. So they gut shot me here, and they have lethal. I can actually take them off lethal. My opponent straight up at this point says, in capital letters, I'll type it out here. He straight up says GG to me. And that, if there's one way to motivate me, that's probably one way to make me play harder. Because I did not appreciate that at all. Like, the game is not technically, the game or match is not even technically over. And they straight up GG'd me at this moment. And I made sure to play harder or try harder because of that. Like, not to mention I was already motivated. Not to mention, like, I already want to win, but if you wanted to give me extra, like, bulletin board material, that's one way to do it. Like, so of course I like buy a turn. I already know this game is probably lost, but I'm thinking, oh, I better win this match because, man, the disrespect in terms of the aggro GG, right? Like, so we're just dead here. Like, there's no real reason to continue with that. But the more the story really is, don't keep the one land hand just because you think they might be on combo. Like, that's just bad. Like, Jax, shout out to him, warned me about that, and I should have known better. Like, just because somebody's on an alt or has no goldfish results doesn't mean they're necessarily on combo. So that one's on me. If you want to count that as misplay number 2, then that works. I was aware of that already, but so yeah, we'll just count it just in case. We'll see. Pretty insane hand, and the way I evaluate hands is with Once Upon a Time. Would I keep if Once Upon a Time hits a land? And I 100% would in this case. This is an insane hand. And lo and behold, I whiff. This is game saving potentially here because you can miss one turn. It's hard to win when you miss 2, and there are exceptions to that rule. And full spoiler alert, it actually happens later in this this event where I actually miss and actually don't hit land drops for multiple turns and somehow turn around the game. I won't say which one. I don't want to throw a certain archetype under the bus, and I will say my opponent that round was very friendly. So I don't want to, I don't want to make them look too poorly because they lost a game where they may have probably should have won. I don't know, but like that opponent that round later in this event was very friendly. So I don't want to say too much about that. So game saving top deck land here, right? But we already look 6 deep to be fair. And here again, I'm playing around days. Like, if they want to daze the heritage, like, be my guest. And here, I almost likely just green sun for 0 because I want the mana. Let me think about that. Why did I do that? I think my logic there was I might have been saving the green sun for additional reclaimers. Not to mention if the visionary whiffs. It's more than 14, by the way, Rebochi, because it's 2 arbors too, right? Because 2 arbors will turn on the cradle. So it's like 15. Let me think. I think in hindsight, I know why. Because I have the second cradle, I kind of wanted this to be a waterwood. It is why I did, or potential reclaimer they kill this, right? Like in the future. That's why I played it the way I did. So, okay. for you Delver players, a hint. If you're assuming that the Elves player is not going to block with Heritage Druid, I wouldn't assume that in general because this keep in mind this is the worst creature in the deck, and every once in a while, if the hand dictates it, I will trade because I don't value Heritage very high. And I know Delver players will think, oh, I want to trade Ragavan with which is my worst creature. But then if you're trading worst creature with worst creature, I think my worst creature is worse than your worst creature, if that makes sense. So I know that's a lot of worse in the same sentence, but all right. So they have the Bolt for the Reclaimer. Here I just cycle the Visionary because I want to dig for lands essentially. I want to get to Endurance, and unfortunately I'm like pretty behind actually on this game too. Like it's kind of crazy that I was able to. Okay, so that was a clutch top deck. There's no reason to play the Grist there. So here because I have two endurances, and typically if I have to, I'll just run it in today's. If they have it, so be it. Right? So I did it on upkeep because um, I forget what I was playing around. I think I wanted them to potentially. So I think this is where my opponent lost the game because they stifled the trigger, and what I was really doing was just hoping to play around Murktide, and instead now they lose one of their DRCs because they have to attack into the endurance. So that tells me they likely have a what is it called? If they're stifling the trigger on endurance there, they likely have a Murktide following up because that's why they want to keep their yard. But it doesn't make sense because they're losing their DRCs here, right? So we draw a land here, I believe, and get lucky. Nope, never mind. I take that back. So maybe they don't have the Murktide. Yeah, so now it doesn't make any sense why they like if you stifle because you want to stick a Murktide, that makes sense. But now you just lose your creatures for no reason. Yeah, I feel like our opponent punted this match. Like we probably should have lost. So the reason why I don't block here, I need the mana. Like I have to hope the endurance sticks and stabilize. Which is I main phase it here because um let me think why did I main phase it there? I could have done it on upkeep in retrospect. Like on opposing upkeep. I don't think it really matters. Here I just want to cantrip for gas. So something to keep in mind here. I draw a shepherd, and then I'm on the awkward number of 7 life. I played it safe. I didn't fetch because you don't want to all of a sudden just die to attack with both flip delvers, bolt you. Yes, it does. Hey, the real X whale is in the house. So shout out to Will for being cool with me, you know mimicking him so to speak, or at least doing a fake impersonation. But yeah, Grist triggers all the stuff, right? Like it triggers Glimpse. It can be found off once upon a time. It's a pretty sweet card overall. Um, Also, something important here is I did not bounce Visionary. The reason being is I wanted the mana. So I top deck Assassin's Trophy here. Let me try to think. From my perspective on this board state, I think I probably go for the trophy and then try to Gris, if I remember correctly. Or, actually, I take that back. What did I do? I might have just Gris, actually. I think I just Gris. So I played the Shepherd to play around Force of Will. Bounce the Visionary that I use for mana. And then play the Gris. And then pitch. Oh, I plus. Why did I plus? Oh, probably didn't want it to just die to. Well. If I minus there, kill an insect. I think minus would have been better here, actually, now that I think about it. I plus, and I don't remember why, but minus might have been better here because what that does is it makes sure that you're just not dead to like something random like submerge your endurance into submerge your endurance and then swing in for like everybody or something like that. So we'll call that maybe misplay number 2, misplay number 3. I did have, for whatever it's worth, a trophy up if need be, but it's still probably not ideal what I just did. So end step, once upon a time, just to be mana efficient. They didn't attack already, so I feel pretty good because I have the endurance and the Assassin's Trophy backup and the Grist activation. All right, so I can just go nuts here. So now I finally minus. It ended up working out, but I think, like I said before, probably the correct play is to, and I might have just kept it because I wanted the Arbor to live, but that would be the only reason I think. But now I can cleanly kill the Aberration. And then now we can finally kill the Torpor Orb and just start drawing a bunch of cards. Yeah, so our opponent just like I think completely melted down, and it was kind of nice too because I got to return the favor, right? If you're gonna GG me, like after just being slightly ahead game 1, then of course I'm gonna GG you after you lose. So that was it. Round 6. They played poorly in the last game. Yeah, they probably should have won, to be honest. Yeah, the stifle just made no sense unless you have the Murktide. I just don't think it makes any sense because like you lose your DRCs, and I'd argue DRC is potentially the best creature in the matchup from the Delver side. Like obviously Ragavan's pretty trash. Delver's like medium. Murktide's really good, but DRCs is what fuels quick Murktides. So for whatever it's worth, and so that didn't make any sense to me. Exactly. So like DRC, to me at least, if you ban Ragavan, like that significantly hurts the non-blue decks in my opinion because like they get to take out 4 cards that are not very good against the non-blue decks and just put like 4 relevant cards, like 4 Delver Seekers or something. And I think, I mean, obviously, like maybe it's just too much to hit Delver, but if you ban DRC and Ragavan, I don't know if that's gonna happen. I know most people complain about Murktide. I think DRC's, I think personally, DRC is the best creature in the game, just because it goes in a blue shell. At least for now, Reclaimer, there's no blue shell that I know of that works. And so I personally have, because its floor on every matchup is significantly higher. It's kind of the reason why I think Reclaimer is better than Shepherd in my list too, because Shepherd's kind of like the green Ragavan, right? It's like very good against the blue decks and Chalice decks, but pretty bad against the non-blue decks. Like I board them out all the time. Ideally, I don't have any remaining. So our opponent is on DNT. And I think if I see 73 cards, that's probably what I would assume too. Although there's the banned Green Sun decks around, but I mean I don't know for sure. I guess that they were on DNT, and this is like reasonable enough. So I keep like I treat this as a miss, but this is I would keep this 6, and then Disaster Strikes. I'm gonna miss off this Once Upon a Time. So my opponent, and credit to them, was very nice. They said good luck, have fun, and so for whatever that's worth. And it was a nice change of pace considering the previous opponent, aggro GG'd me. So here I'm thinking, man, I really need a top deck on Lancing. I'm almost thankful this happened, actually, because it almost means I got an extra turn. I think if I'm from the opposing side, I probably, if I'm from the opposing side, I probably try to deploy enough threats, but I'm almost happy they wastelanded there. Agreed, Lunil. So we have a resident DNT specialist in the house. I mean, I play DNT on paper as well, but obviously not to the level as some of the other people like Jason and John Ryan Hamilton. So yeah, that I'm almost happy they wastelanded there. Right. So I kind of agree. I think everybody in chat is kind of agreement. Like, kind of a strange play. Full disclosure, like I don't want to rag on this opponent too much just because seemed pretty friendly overall, but I think they were inexperienced in this matchup. So a few questionable things to come in the next game. So here I might as well you know play the bog. There's argument to be made to play the Cradle in case I top deck Arbor, but I'd rather just get this like out of the way first. It also opens up. Well, let me think about that. I'd rather we have one Wasteland already. I don't want to expose the other one, I guess. So yeah, we missing land drops. Although hitting the bog is not the worst here. One good thing did happen as a result of drawing the bog. You'll see. Is I finally hit the fetch, and this is like a game-saving fetch. We're on turn 5. I have no mana, and they have an active Aether Vial and like slow pressure, but some pressure, I guess. Um, what I do here is game-saving because in the sense that drawing this land, I can go play my 1-drop, which is the Reclaimer, because I want to filter this black source into a green source. And then I'm going to Green Sun for 0, which is 1 in case with the Dahlia attacks, right? I need to get off the ground. Like, I'm so far behind at this point. I need to catch up. Like randomly the block extra mana mattered here, right? Like we are suddenly back in the game. Like this doesn't look that bad anymore. Yeah, I don't think we care at this point. So they were like aggro hitting our Wastelands with their Flickerwiz. Hard to say what they had in their hand, if that's the right play or not. Like, only they would know because I don't have access to their hand. I think here, what did I do? Oh, I think I just played everything because we had the Cradle coming back. Yeah. So some cool sequencing tricks by me to like, extract every mana possible. The reason why it matters because for untaps on your opposing side, all right, so here's kind of a cool play that comes up. So they end step Wisp again here, and um, the first time it worked. This time they don't realize we have an onboard reclaimer with untaps, so it's free, right? Like I'm gonna get to untap with my Gaia's Cradle because I'm gonna sacrifice it for my other Cradle, and then Once Upon a Time. So the reason why to sequence this first is because you don't want to see the Cradle as one of your 5 Once Upon a Time cards, which is like anybody who's played cantrips like will know this. Like you want to thin out before you actually see in case it matters. It matters like especially since you know you put to the bottom too, right? Which is huge. So let's see what we see once Upon a Time. Mostly trash, like essentially, right? Like the heritage is obviously the only thing we take. It's not even that good here. All right, so we just top deck real. The crazy thing about Once Upon a Time is any late game in this deck, especially like it's almost a dig through time. Like I know that's an exaggeration. Like obviously I'm being a little facetious, but I just put 5 bad cards to the bottom of my deck, and obviously the glimpse is the one exception. Like maybe that's like good here, but 4 bad cards, and then because you in the mid game you want very specific things. That's either Natural Order, Green Sun, Symbiote, Visionary, or Hoof, and it finds half of those things. I'm not really counting Hoof because it's only a one of, but it finds Visionary, it finds Wirewood. Um, Obviously, it doesn't find Natural or Green Sun, but that's a lot of hits, and this thing is just absolutely nuts in the mid to late game. It's like a mini dig through time essentially, and the game is over from here, right? Like I don't think I need. I guess I'll just show my sequencing, just play everything out. If this was post board, I would only play one creature before huffing. Like no need to walk into the mind break trap. That's like something to keep in mind. But I mean, besides that, I'm not gonna play around main deck. Sure. I mean, keep in mind this is a green deck that we're in. So the mana is almost free, right, in the late game. But sure, you heard it here first. Dig through time. So number 2. Our opponent, obviously, like the Wasteland, they probably should have been ahead a little bit more than they were because they didn't need to waste this turn 1. Hard to say if that would have mattered or not. I'm not sure it would have mattered given that board state, but again, maybe things play out differently. Alright, obviously cannot keep this. This is like pretty solid. Anybody want to guess what's getting put back here? This is a good mulligan hand question, I guess. It's actually not as intuitive as you would think. So Chris has it right. The reason why it's glimpse is
Again, you need to have mana to play Glimpse, and you can't just hold creatures in hand. You have to deploy them. So this is actually a natural order hand, and I put the Glimpse back here. Like, and most people think, oh, Glimpse, that's an ancestral recall. Why don't you? Why would you put it back? It's just because you can't play it for a long time. Like, you don't want dead cards. So that's exactly what I do. All right. When they Pithing Needle on the stat, I was like, oh my god, please don't tell me they're gonna like hit my Windswept Heath or something like that. But luckily, they went with a pretty common name, which is the Wirewood. So here again, I fetched first before I once. I guess I kept the land. I think that was the only choice. I clicked through. I clicked through too quickly. So here, I think I just play everything out. The reason why I do it this way is because if I draw a 1-drop off the Glimpse, sorry, not the Glimpse, the Visionary, I can just play it for maximum mana. I think I whiffed though. Yeah. See, this card always magically finds its way back to your hand, even when you put it away. All right. Again, my opponent is inexperienced with this matchup. As I said, full disclosure. Any guesses to what they incorrectly named here? There's obvious. There's, in my opinion, usually only one choice. For not, I mean, I'm not gonna say always, but in most cases, I think you just named 4. Our opponent named 1, unfortunately. Yeah, I can. Okay, I see what you're saying, Jason. Yeah, so they named 1, and that's just game right here. One protects Needle, and I assume they got GT. Yeah, I mean what did they get earlier? No, they got Cauldra. So for whatever that's worth. So again, maybe our opponent is just maybe not familiar with the matchup, or maybe the GT is in hand or something. Like that's entirely possible. Yeah. So okay. While Jason's here, I mean I'll give away free intel, right? I don't really care. Um, it'll make me a better player in the long run, anyways. So heads up to the DNT players. Elves, at least for me, uh, I've been playing 3, and most lists will have at least 2 right now. Force of Vigor in the sideboard. It's not even for elves really. It's for the lands matchup, but it just so happens the card is like insane against DNT and insane against 8 cast as well. So naming 2 is not even that safe anymore. And man, the blowouts you get because of Spirit of the Labyrinth or Urza Saga, yeah, Saga is the big one. Also, I forget who I was playing against the other day. Oh, it was shoot. I think it was like J Franz or something like that. But I had this cool line where that comes up every once that I realized you can do now with Force of Vigor is opponent has Spirit of the Labyrinth out. I had exactly 5 mana and a Visionary hand. And I also had a Wirewood and an Arbor. What I did was I cast the Visionary, trigger on the stack, bounce the Visionary, untap my Arbor, because I needed 6 mana to do everything on the same turn. And then Force of Vigor, hardcast, hit the Spirit of the Labyrinth, and I forget what the other target was. Something like Cage or something. I don't remember. And so I can have an extra mana, essentially, free roll of mana, while keeping the Visionary draw. So that's a pretty sick line to keep in mind. Yeah, so you can do the same thing also with Assassin's Trophy, Fatal Push. Actually, it doesn't work with Fatal Push because unless you can generate mana with the Birch Lore, but yeah, you can do the same thing with like Assassin's Trophy Decay or whatever. By responding to the Visionary trigger on the stack, bouncing it with the Wirewood, untapping something to hardcast a removal spell essentially on the Spirit of the Labyrinth. So that came up the other day. So our opponent here is just dead. Yeah, I don't want to fault our opponent too much. It seemed like they were not experienced with this matchup because I think naming one is not the right call there. And then I think if you're in any danger of dying, you probably want to name four. But there is some merit to naming two, although it's not as safe as it once was. Especially if you're playing against like the white version, which Rumcore / Inigo has been playing a lot lately. I mean, I played that first. That's entirely possible too. I'm not gonna like bash on our opponent. Like the only way you get better is you make mistakes, and it just seemed like our opponent just hadn't played this matchup before. And in their defense, if they picked up this deck recently, and I know Jason and John have been doing real well with DNT, so people have been on the min max website for the DNT primer. I don't think since the primer, Elves has been largely represented. Like, so there's this joke that I've seen been going around. Anurag mentioned on his stream, like, oh, somebody mentioned on Anurag's stream, oh, if Newton gets an edge last season because he played on a different account. Now, Anurag actually, without me actually, I got relayed this actually, but Anurag, without saying anything, without knowing that I had heard it, but actually corrected his viewer and said, well, to be fair, the minute somebody gets posted and if they're, leading the trophy race, so to speak, you got to assume, he said, I mean, I take this as a compliment for Anurag, so if you want to relay to Anurag, feel free to. But I'll take it as a compliment. He just said, well, I'm just going to always assume that's Newton now. And I'm like, well, I guess I didn't think of it that way, but he has a good point, especially if the build is Reclaimer. And then Max just joked about this as well. Max Thorson, aka Max Gilmore, who's a good friend of mine. He said, well, who else could it be, right? It's like either you or Jarvis mentioned this, right? It's either you or Jorg or somebody who's played Elves before and maybe recently switched to Reclaimer. But there's only two people who, recently, up until I say recently, who played the deck. So, you have a 50-50 chance, so to speak. And I said, well, I guess that's a good point. There's not too many. The legacy community is kind of small, so their argument is it's highly unlikely somebody came out of nowhere and just started picking up the deck and doing well with it, especially one that requires more training, so to speak, as Elves. So next game. So this is round 7 that we're going into now. At this point, I'm thinking, oh, maybe there's a chance we can actually, complete the comeback, so to speak. Lark Blue. I think they, not ironically, play a blue deck. And I think they ended up... I'm not sure about that, Andrew. I'm a little biased, obviously. I actually think this version of Elves is the hardest deck to play in Legacy. And the reason being is because you're juggling multiple hats. Like, you're a control deck, you're an aggro deck, you're a combo deck, you're like all of those things wrapped into one. And a lot of those elements generally don't overlap skill set. And that's actually why I think this deck is the hardest deck to play in Legacy. And I think Reclaimer is a large reason for it. I think anytime that you have more decisions to make, the harder the deck's going to be. And Reclaimer means that at any point you can screw up the game by tutoring the wrong time or not tutoring or tutoring the wrong thing. So, yeah, like the more decisions you have to make, the harder the deck, in my opinion, to play. I love the Minotaur reference from Stefan. I think what Andrew is saying is also accurate, but I disagree in the sense that very rarely is a deck harder to play against than it is to play. The difference is the person playing the deck just has more experience
is why it seems that way, in my opinion. So pretty generic hand overall. I think I would keep this in the dark against most decks. It has two lands, one of which is Cradle, and it has Green Suns, like pretty good. Ragavan, I would just assume Delver, like or like a UR variant, like Tempo Wish. So this is a pretty aggro force. I've seen people do this a lot. I know the reasoning behind it, although I don't necessarily agree. It's because they think, oh, we have to play our forces early because they'll be dead later due to Shepherd. That typically signals to me if you're gonna do that, you probably don't have removal. Like it's usually a dead giveaway. Oops. Much harder to play than play against than play. Let me think about that for a second. So, why do you think Repo Cheap Sneak and Show is hard to play against? I mean, there's a running joke, right? That Show and Tell is the hardest part of the deck. So here the Ragavan's attacking. I grimace every time they take my Reclaimer. Luckily, they don't have 3 fetches yet. I forget who I was joking with this conversation. Like every time my Reclaimer gets taken away, I was joking with I forget who. They said, "Well, that's what you get. You put good cards in your elf deck, so that's the punish, so to speak, right?" But luckily here, not the worst yet because it's not a 3/4 yet. And the tempo hit is huge actually if they go for that. Here, the game plan here is to develop mana. Like I can't stress enough, if you develop mana as an elf player, you're probably gonna win the game. The ways you don't develop mana, if they Gristlebrand turn 1, you can never get to turn 2, right? Like you haven't developed your mana. Another way is like if they Tendrils kill you turn 1, you never develop your mana. Yeah, so that's the thing, right, Jason? I think if blue players ever found out how to incorporate Reclaimer efficiently, this might be the best deck. This might be the best creature in Legacy. The only reason why I'm saying it's not is because it doesn't fit in the blue shell right now. And if you want to say Ragavan because it's like very oppressive against like the blue decks, like I'm not going to dispute it too much. I personally just think DRC because it's better against everything, just the way. And I'm consistent, right? Like I think Reclaimer is better than Shepherd because it's better against everything. Higher floor, ceiling is almost as high, maybe not as high. Like obviously the Shepherd's ceiling against Chalice decks is just nuts, right? But typically I like these high floor cards. Like I think especially the way I built this, it's almost like a mid-range deck that can fast combo kill if need be. Like I'm gonna force you to beat me like on higher card quality. I think that's mostly accurate, Jason. I think a lot of people, yeah, don't even think Ragavan. I mean, some obviously think it's the most broken. I'm not gonna name who thinks that. I'm not one of those people, but yes, some people don't want Ragavan banned just because it's unfun. My personal stance on it is, I think Legacy is a casual format. So if that's what the player base wants, I don't really care. Yeah, it does make for bad gameplay, but so do a lot of other cards. And if you want to ban the other cards, like I don't personally care. Like I'm fine with it. Um, but I do think if you ban that by itself, that might warp the metagame for what it's worth. Because I think non-blue decks, for what it's worth, from a metagame perspective, are the best it's been in quite a long time. Because this is kind of like 4 mediocre cards against them, and I think if you want to balance for metagame purposes, and I know another card that people hate playing against is, I mean, I personally, like I said, I don't want to get too much into the ban list because if people want a card ban, I don't really care. I think it's probably best for the community so people are happy. but I do think it's gonna hurt the the metagame. So another card people hate playing against is Murktide. That's conveniently good against the non-blue decks, so that might be worth it. You take both out at the same time. So take two fun cards out in Murktide and Ragavan, and ideally the removal of Ragavan is offset by the removal of Murktide, so the non-blue decks don't really get affected in a meta way, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, if you want to ban 3, 4 or more cards, that's probably worth. Like DRC, I think is like probably the most egregious card in my opinion. Like, I just think the fact that you can just delve at any time is nuts. Like, maybe that's an indication, an indictment on the delve mechanic, really, but nonetheless, yeah, Saga, fair enough. Have made fair enough. Yeah, Ragavan indirectly, and then Saga, yeah. I mean, some other cards that I wouldn't mind seeing. I mean, there's a whole bunch, right? Like, I don't want to get into that, but I probably agree with most of the stuff that is mentioned in chat. I used to be of the mindset. I used to be of the mindset that you should probably ban for balance. The problem is I didn't factor in cards, paper cards being expensive. So I do feel for people who bought cards and then suddenly they lose their whole collection or just gets completely devalued. So yeah, that's a good suggestion, Jason. So I think because it is a casual format, it's like probably closer to EDH than anything else. Like it's definitely not modern, where I think modern is more like banned for competitive reasons or whatnot. So if you want to ban Ragavan because a large percentage of the mid range or control blue decks and combo decks don't want to play against it, then that's probably fine in my eyes. Like I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's trying. Most of the legacy crowd, I think, is trying to have fun. I could be wrong though, but that's just a guess. So again, I'm just playing everything out because I want to maximize Cradle the following turn. I didn't bounce anything because I want, the Cradle that makes the most mana as possible. If they connect with Ragavan, so be it. I'm not going to block anyways. Luckily, they did not have the Murktide here. That would have been potentially catastrophic. I think here I probably just glimpse. If they want to force it, so be it. Yeah, so I'm pretty ahead in this match. Like, endurance pretty much locks it up. Like, it's hard to have removal for the Shepherd plus the counter for the Natural Order. Again, he's got lands and spells. I'll keep in most cases. And as I want to deck thin because I want to dig deeper. If that card sees a Cradle, I'm snap taking the Cradle. This is like not the best deck, but so the funny thing about Bog is the naturally drawn Bog is a lot liver than most people think, and it's especially because of the delve threats. It's also because of DRC, and then it's because of Euro. Here, like typically you want what you don't already have in your hand. Anybody want to guess what the take is here? Because I don't think it's as. I guess there's only two options. You have 50-50 chance of getting it right, right? So, as a general rule of thumb, when I like see cards off of Once Upon a Time, and it's early, I actually don't think Shepherd is great yet, unless I have Birch Lore to make mana with it. So I actually take the Wirewood here. Like you want Shepherd really for the mid to late game, when you already have the mana established. Oops, what's going on? Oh, there we go. No, we don't want to fetch because we already have 3 lands.
So here I play the Visionary. They can technically. So here's one of the things I'm talking about. They can technically actually cast Murktide, but with only one creature in the with only one creature. Sorry, not one creature. With only one non creature spell in the yard. I'm not too afraid of a 4/4 Murktide. Like I think I can win through it, especially with the two removal spells in hand. So I'm gonna essentially try to extract more value out of the bog. So the Canonist is like pretty good here. And then I finally just bog here because like I can't play anything else, right? There's an argument to be made. I play a fetch, and then I trophy the Canonist. But I think given that they're down on cards, I'm probably okay with that. So Canonist and Iteration is kind of a combo. I think the area where it tends to start to matter is like if it's a 6/6. 5/5 is even like manageable a lot of times. 4/4 is like nothing almost. I think what did I do here? I think given this board state, I feel like I Once Upon a Time. Yeah. The reason why I'm saving the removal spell. So I hit off the Once Upon a Time, like the Endurance and the Reclaimer. I immediately okay. This is like misplay number 4 here, right? I already know I took the wrong card here. What is the correct take here? So I end up taking the Reclaimer, and I regretted it immediately. The reason being is with the Canonist on board, we can actually develop our board at instant speed to kind of get around the Canonist. And click too quickly, so to speak. Not to mention, it wipes their yard too, which is like kind of relevant. I was just tunnel visioning into Cradle. So they forced the Reclaimer, which is like, I guess, consistent with their behavior before, where they forced the turn 1 green sun because they're afraid of the Shepherd. Also, it builds towards a Murktide. Yeah, so Endurance is the correct play. Yeah, so that was a screw up on my behalf. There I want to trade only because in most cases this is the card I fear in the matchup. Like I don't care about Ragavan, I don't care about Delver for the most part. This is like what's the word I'm looking for? Already assigned for Murktide. So now I'm like undoing a mistake I made earlier. Now I'm getting the Endurance. So here I want to make as much mana as possible so I can actually run out the Grist. And then untap. Unfortunately, I'm going to get somewhat blown out by End of Festivities.
I think I'm feeling really good here, but this board is soft to end the festivities, and I get pretty, hit hard by it right here. Which is pretty backbreaking. I mean, savage top deck, obviously, right? Better lucky than good. So one thing to keep in mind is I didn't fetch, and the reason being is I'm actually out of fetchables. In my build, I only run the bare minimum, which is 2 basics, 2 bayous, and 2 arbors, which are both dead. The reason why I play more fetches is because it's so important, and I can't stress this enough, for 2 reasons. The mana fixing, and Reclaimer being a 3/4. Here I just, gotta draw out of this. The fetch is still live in the sense that if I draw a Reclaimer, I can pitch it for a Cradle when we get further down the road. So this Once Upon a Time is, again, we have our... Yeah, they did let the doggos out. It was pretty bad. At that point, I was like, oh god, I probably might lose this game. And especially since they went... they let the dogs out and they went into a Murktide, so the dogs and the dragons, right? It's like a big animal party. Luckily, we top decked the Assassin Trophy. Yeah, I mean, like, it's annoying for me as an elf player, but at the end of the day, I don't think, like, I'm not gonna say, oh, this is power creep is too much. Like, I don't think it's not unreasonable or anything. Like, so what if it kills a Grist? Like, that's like more fringe, right? Like, it's really only this deck that it hurts. So they hardcast Force here because I think they want to dig. Alright, so I have an Endurance. I attack with both, and then... Because I want this to die, and then I can just slam an Endurance and hopefully win the game. So iteration. All right. So one thing I want to mention is a big difference between this version and the traditional build is look at how live all our top decks are. Like, there's no quote unquote bad cards. The only one is like the Heritage, but that, like, what can you do? Like, there's only... I have to keep Heritage in the deck. So the way I board against Delver is I take out the Natural Order package because I want to keep low to the ground. And I think you win any longer game. I just don't want dead cards at the beginning of the game against Delver when they can punish you for like one land hands and things like that, or keep your mana locked up. The reason why this version is significantly more favored against Delver is because, again, you're trading in a card, Nettle Sentinel, that's dependent on other cards to be good, and Queen Ranger, which is like decent, not the worst, but like also a little bit soft to like Blazing Volley types of effects for, essentially Jax. Yeah, so Stefan kind of hints at it. I know people are gonna find this surprising. If a Reclaimer ever becomes a 3/4, untap it, and it is not summoning sick. In my mind, if you play tight, the game is already over. Like, at that point, obviously there's exceptions where like somehow they snuck in a Murktide beforehand or something like that. But like in general, the elf player is likely going to win if that's been the case because they can't kill it anymore. And anybody who's played Delver Mirrors in the past has known, historically speaking, Tormagoyf is pretty nuts in the mirrors. So think of a Reclaimer as a Tormagoyf that randomly also is a Knight of the Reliquary. What I mean by that is, uh, it's big. It's bigger than everything else on the other field. I mean, Murktide kind of changes that a little bit, but it controls the graveyard. It actually undoes all the mana now because, oh, you wastelanded three of my, my arbors and my bayous. Okay, now I just untap with the guys. Essentially, all of that has been undone. Like, it's just completely. What's the word I'm looking for? It undoes the whole Delver game plan against you, is so to speak. Not to mention, now you have a mana sink in Allosaurus Shepherd to go with it. So the nice thing about Reclaimer and Shepherd is they do different things. And in this case, I think that's a benefit because they kind of have strengths where the other is a weak. So what I mean by that is Reclaimer is good against the graveyard deck, combo decks. Shepherd, not so much. Shepherd good against Chalice. Reclaimer is like kind of meh in those matchups because it's a little slow to find a Cradle. Reclaimer is buff against the sweeper effects, whereas Shepherd is kind of weak against those. Yeah, I do miss Tarmogoyf too. I kind of miss Rogue Delver Mirrors. Speaking from somebody who also owns Tarmogoyf on paper, so Jax, our resident, what is it called? Combo specialist, likes to call this deck, 3/4 tribal now, right? Because I have max. I have max reclaimers, max endurances, and then max green stuff. That's like 12 3/4s in the deck, which is like annoying for bolt decks. So I'm gonna attack more and then nuke their yard. So I did this main phase because I want to. Well, I guess it doesn't matter, but I should have really checked if they wanted to waste me and on my end step and then do it on their upkeep. So minor like sequencing thing here, but I think overall probably not gonna matter. Like if they wasteland here, I feel a little bit bad, right? Like, but they didn't. They because I have 5 mana, right? They're keeping the wasteland for Cradle. Okay, so they decide to go for there, which is kind of strange, but I think I top deck Cradle here, which is ironic. Yeah. So better lucky than good, right? Like they chose the wrong turn. Like you hold the wasteland the whole time and suddenly you use it, so it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and then I just have lethal here. I mean, even without lethal from the Shepherd, they're in big trouble anyways because of the Green Sun. So one thing I want to keep in mind, that they thought about 3/4 Island Arbor with Defender. Oh, jeez. As an island? Oh my god. Also, imagine playing something and then so they target your land. You play Brainstorm and then you daze in response and don't pay just to save your arbor. That's kind of nuts. I'm glad Stefan is mentioning that here. But yeah, I mean, one thing that I want to mention about Shepherd too is it's a little bit overrated in the fair matchups. What I mean by that is, yeah, it's good against permission, but keep in mind that's typically the case only game 1. Game 2, especially if Elves is good or D&T or creature decks are good, you gotta expect at least Plague Engineer or like at least multiple sweepers out of decks, and it actually can be a liability in post board. So I don't think it changes the fair matchups too much, in my opinion, because, like I said, it can be a liability. What it does do for the deck, though, is you have an insane Chalice matchup now. The other thing is, for a long time, one of the worst matchups for Elves was Doomsday, because you just don't you can't stop what they're doing really because the only thing you really have is Thoughtseize, and if they have the turn one Dark Ritual Doomsday, you can't really do anything about it. With the Printing of Endurance, that has actually completely flipped the matchup, and especially oops, it's not here, but I revealed this last week. I think it was last week on Romario Meister. I revealed this on Romero in my stream that I actually think I have flipped the Doomsday matchup for Elves. Like, you're still not favored game one, but post board, your plan is just now A plus B, where A is Allosaurus Shepherd or Green Sun Zenith for Allosaurus Shepherd, and B is Endurance or Assassin's Trophy. And it turns out they have a hard time beating that. And that's a little bit of a preview about what's going to happen later in this event. Right. So Andrew mentioned it. Like, I don't think Shepard actually moves the needle too much against the fair decks. For sure, game one. Like, I'm not going to dispute that, especially like if they don't have sweepers. But because it's a liability, I don't think it's particularly great. It's like okay, right? Post board once they have sweepers coming in. Obviously, it's a nut card against Chalice. That's probably the hugest change. But in addition to the blue combo decks, so like Show and Tell has gotten significantly better, and so has Doomsday. And like I said, I think personally speaking, and maybe because I have more experience against good Doomsday players, but I think Elves is favored post board now, and that's something I would not have said a few months ago because I actually thought a few months ago Doomsday was like the worst matchup for Elves. But Endurance and essentially the rediscovery of Assassin's Trophy, because Assassin's Trophy is good against Murktide, it's good against Tabernacle, it's good against Merit Lage, it's good against post Doomsday if they pass the turn. So like it hits pretty much everything that you care about. Like it's a little bit worse against D&T in like the fair matchup like Chalice, but you tend to be significantly favored in those matchups. I know D&T players will say that it's closer, and I would agree with that. But I think also the players who say this, Jason and John themselves, are probably better than the respective Elves players that they're playing against, is my guess. And I think if equal skill pilots, the Elf player is probably 50-50 pre-board and probably pretty favored post-board. And the reason being is because pre-board, you have a lot of dead cards. Like Shepherd's dead, Bog is dead, Endurance is dead, Archon's pretty bad. Yeah, that is. Also, Solitude means it's very dangerous to hoof when it's not lethal. You're right. So Solitude is it. I still think we're favored, but I just don't think it's like. I think it's closer. I just don't think it's like 50-50 or anything like that. I think it's still like pretty significant if pilots are the same skill level. It's not like before where I jokingly. I mean, I know I have a lot of D&T friends, so I'm obviously just kidding. But I would joke before against D&T. You just click buttons at random and you probably still win. Like, and now you have. I take them seriously. Like I will actually focus against D&T players. All right. I think we are on round 8 now. So our opponent is like a very good blue-red Delver player, and I think this match I might have played the tightest I played all tournament. Obviously, Stefan is a very good Delver player too here, so I don't want to take away anything from Stefano, who actually won the Eternal Weekend Wasteland event himself. Here, like, it's got 3 lands. 2 of them are conditional, but I think you still keep. And then I'm going to lead with, if I remember correctly, I think I led with Green Sun. No, Stefan is very good. I just mentioned, Stefan, that we're playing against Binu, who's a very good Delver player, but I didn't want to take anything away from you since you won the tournament yourself. So So congratulations, by the way. I think I mentioned that before in one of the chats that we're both involved in. But you know, we have yeah, they are. So it's funny too. Every time this happens, where Ragavan exiles game one, like a Kratos of our national order, I'm like relieved, right? So this was probably the biggest win for me in the tournament, from the sense that Binu was undefeated actually at the time too, and they got pared down. I was at 6-1, they were at 7-0 in round eight. So here, yeah, I want to untap with Reclaimer. So they probably prioritize killing the Reclaimer, which means the Arbor lives, and they're not really close to Murktide yet. So that's why I didn't play the Bog. Right. So yeah. So they smartly killed the Reclaimer because little known secret, or actually kind of known, Reclaimer is actually the best creature in this matchup. Like it's endurance, but you can argue Shepherd because endurance costs 3 mana, and then it's Wirewood, and then it's Visionary, and then because Wirewood protects Shepherd and Reclaimer, and then it's Birchlore, and then far beyond those, at the very end is Heritage. All right, so they are, when I see something like this where aggressive cantripping, I just assume they're gonna have Murktide the following turn. So you kind of have to bog here. Again, I'm leading with a Shepherd to play everything out. I actually low key want them to hit the Shepherd here because I want the Cradle online. I'm not gonna block. So they didn't have the removal because if they did, for sure you got to take the Reclaimer off the board there. Like the minute this becomes a 3/4, you cannot kill it anymore. That's the problem. It's like it's an actual nightmare for Delver. So here's something that's interesting. They have a Wasteland for my Cradle. The problem is I don't have any more lands or Cradle in my hand, and I need to develop. I'm just going to go ahead and allow them to Wasteland me because it grows the Reclaimer, and next turn I can get the Cradle online, ideally. So yeah, I allow them to do it, and then now I can Cradle. So when they attack with the Ragavan, what first came to my mind is like, oh, they gotta really get the Reclaimer off the board, so they're gonna bolt it, or yeah, so and they probably have a second Ragavan is what came to my mind. But it turned out they got a Murktide instead, and the first thing that came to my mind is their hand must be all permission and dead cards like other Ragavan. Like it seems like I've already stabilized because this Reclaimer is a 3/4 and they cannot get through, right? That's why it's almost like desperation. They have to get the Murktide because there's no pressure. So here I fetch first, and even though this gets me into a multiple of 4, I'm not too concerned because I have a protected natural order kill, right? Not to mention, okay, so now I just have like everything. So somebody asked the question earlier. Oh, do you draw? I think it was Will. So, do we draw a card off Grist? And the answer is yes. Yeah, I think Elves is just a really good deck. I think, especially, I mean, obviously I'm biased. I think this version is just very difficult to hate out. You have higher card quality, and especially in the hands of a good pilot like Jorg, you, in my opinion, have a pretty favorable Delver matchup. And I know some people have said that Jorg didn't play against Ragavan. He mentioned it himself. For what it's worth, I played against it 4 times. I went 4-0, and Binu is very good too. So it's not like I'm playing against chopped liver or anything. Like I do think the elf matchup in this configuration is significantly favored against Delver. Like I think in the 4 matches, I went 8-1. Like, and the one was because I kept a sketch because and that was my fault because I thought they were on combo because they didn't have a username like on that I can look up on Goldfish. So I attempted to draw 2 there, but I missed. Yeah, I think that's probably true. Like, it might even make York's, Bayou win even more impressive, right? Because, like, especially, I think York, I think from reps with this deck, he by far has the second most, only behind me. And I think if I were to have somebody play this deck and my life depended on it or whatever depended on it, the person I would have play for me is York because he's picked this deck up like not too far behind when I was doing really well with it, which is like early 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, so to speak, right? It's around the time of I think. Let me think. Underworld Breach probably had been just banned or yeah, probably had just been banned, and then we had not reached companions yet. But he picked up the deck around the same time as me, or at least when initial iterations of this deck with when I started to add like Once Upon a Time and things like that. But we a lot of times will confer with each other, and like I said, in terms of play skill, he probably, if anything, because I can be a little sloppy, can often even play tighter than I do with the deck, and I invented the deck, right? Like so, um, major shout out and props to York for his good run. Also, the thing about having York around, which is nice too, is because he has a lot of experience with the deck as well. Is he and some others that I will consult with are not afraid to like challenge my thinking on certain sideboarding and whatnot. And a lot of times, what happens is it'll either make me have to, it's like a thesis defense, right? You either show why this is the case, or if you can't prove it, then maybe that's something we need to address, like in terms of like flawed logic or whatnot. So here, yeah, I kill the Murktide. I just want to protect the Grist. That's gonna take over the game. All right, so we top deck another Cradle, and now we can probably just. All right, the Wirewood's insane here because it's a draw 2, right? With a Glimpse. Yeah, the one Grist means that you just do so much, right? You have tutorable removal. You can play through not contamination, Containment Priest. I'm thinking of EDH, by the way. Uh, Control decks have a hard time beating this deck, and it pumps your Cradle mana. So again, they're just using the days to cantrip because they don't have removal. Yeah, so that happens a lot, Andrew. Where you have natural order, they flash in priest, you get Grist, and you still win anyways, even if it's not Progenitus. Here, I'm gonna start applying pressure, right? Because I think I can end the game soon. Yeah. Also, the writing's on the wall. Like, what I'm gonna do here is they exiled my Cradle Hoof earlier. I'm just gonna get an Archon name instant and just go wide. I mean, I thought we were Jedi or Ewoks, Legacy Council. So, I mean, I take offense to you're suggesting we're Sith here. And no, so Yorg is not my apprentice or anything. I consider him my peer. For those of you who are curious, Yorg has not as many reps as me, but he plays in bigger events. So I don't really play the challenges. I play like leagues a lot, and I think anybody who's followed Yorg at all last year, I think he had a stretch of like 12 top eights or something like that with the deck. So something ridiculous. for the most part too, York will play the same list I play in leagues. So they're and actually that tends to be kind of good too, right? Because that helps with the testing in the sense that leagues there's more combos. So when we get to real big events, York feels pretty good about the combo matches because it's been heavily tested against in leagues already, right? Like if you don't lose the combo, and I think this is the best iteration the deck has ever been against combo. Um, uh, I think you're pretty favored in the fair matchups. Uh, I think the natural question is, so what is L's weak to? Obviously, there's fringe things like Belcher, but I'm omitting that for a second. Um, I lose to Iron Claw 2016 a lot in leagues because they haven't played when I play. But I think the bad matchup that I'm a little bit afraid of is Lands. For those of you who want a deck that is good against Elves, I think Lands is pretty good because Tabernacle plus Wasteland plus Sphere is not easy to navigate through. Uh, I think tests can be kind of hard, but it's better ever since I realized that their mana base is a little fragile. Like Assassin's Trophy is just sinkhole in the matchup. The other thing that is show and tell or sneak and show can be hard, but the problem with sneak and show is it's not particularly good against the meta right now because of Delver and DNT. So my list is a little soft to show and tell, but I have been beating them because the four Thoughtseize are pretty relevant still. And you have a fast clock in Shepherd. Alright, so this game ended. Game 2. So again, you have lands and spells, you can keep most. Here, I'm going to expect the first thing to die, so I'm going to lead with a Heritage. The problem is, from the Delver perspective, what are you going to do? Not kill it, and then they just like generate mana off the Cradle? Like, you almost have to kill it because you time walk yourself, right? Again, leading with a Shepherd to protect the Reclaimer, which is the real threat in this matchup. It's a little bit scary too, because if you allow the Elf player to untap with the to a Heritage, sorry, to a Allosaurus Shepherd, that means they can just combo with no fear. Like it's like double jeopardy, right? With the Shepherd and the Reclaimer. So again, the Birchlord being a good top deck there. And then I could just like dig super deep. Again, for those of you who want to pick up this deck, I will leave this as an exercise to you to figure out the sequencing. Like, should be mechanical. It's a little bit too hard for me to explain how that works here. All right, so they didn't have the Murktide. We had the two answers anyways. Or more specifically, Green Sun is Zenithizin. Alright, so I lead with the Heritage there for more mana. What I'm going to end up doing here is I have to assume, let me see. They ended the turn with just casting a Ragavan after the Expressive Iteration. But I have to assume that they can get Murktide out at any time because that's how you lose this game. And the DRC is a problem because I don't want my Grist to die. So the goal here is you got to be able to kill the DRC and then tick down with a Grist and kill the other flyer. And that way, what's it called? You can stabilize, so to speak, right? Because I'm going to bog. You got to do all three things in one turn. So I'm going to lead with the Once Upon a Time here. It sees a Visionary, a Shepherd, a Reclaimer, and a Cradle. I think because they have three cards here, and these are high impact cards, I take the Shepherd and force these through. yeah. I do that, and now I should be casting the Grist, I believe. So again, the sequencing here is to generate more black mana and make sure I can attack through. So they actually have the gut shot for the Shepherd, which tells me they have the Force in hand because they're gonna get me to bounce the Shepherd, and I didn't play my Cradle, but that's okay because even if they have this, I can play the Cradle next and then still lethal them right now. So that's what ends up happening. So they do that. This gives the opening for them to force. The gut shot dies. It's a 3-for-1 really, or 3-for-0, or 3-for-1. I guess it hits the Grist. Now I play the Shepherd, and I actually have now lethal because this Cradle will Legend Rule, and then I can kill the Ragavan. They're Hellbent, and then hit them for 14 with the Reclaimer. I even bogged there. That wasn't even really necessary. So yeah, Reclaimer being 14 7/7s is, comes up fairly decently. But typically, if you're in that position, you probably already won. Like, I was significantly ahead in this game. All right, so that's that. So I got paired into Wonder Pro, which is a Doomsday player. This had a fast kill that's protected by Shepherd. So I kept. I'm on the play, so that helped. That you kind of have to get lucky in this matchup. So I glimpse. I'm just trying to get to natural order turn 3, right? And it turns out actually I have lethal through Shepherd as well. But the narrator is gonna say we never get to a turn 3. So I mentioned this earlier, Legacy Council. I think the Elf Doomsday matchup is now favorable for Elves because you'll lose game 1, but should be favored games 2 and 3. And that's exactly actually what happened. So here I actually thought I was going to steal game 1 because of Shepherd and Glimpse. The problem is I never got a turn 3. I don't know why, but sometimes Doomsday, it glitches. Yeah, so we're just dead here. Yeah, I don't know why they had this issue. Whenever I replay any Doomsday matchup, like it seems to be an issue. I don't know if I'm the only one that gets this when I'm doing playback, but it says playback finished exiting is the error. Let me see what they did. No, it wasn't from the hand, Jason. They made it in the pile. If I recall correctly. So they made their pile. Actually, no, you're right. They made their pile, they cast LED, discard, and then drew into the pile with deep analysis. So that was a pretty sick pile. So Jason is correct. Yeah, so narrator in a sad voice. Yeah, so Jason plays, non-blue decks, specifically depths and... Yeah, I actually thought I was going to steal game 1 here, but... it was not meant to be. Like, they got the turn 2 kind of nutty hand, like, from the hand, and then took game 1. But we kind of expect to lose game 1 against Doom. It's not impossible to steal game 1s, because sometimes Doomsday will lose to itself, especially non-personal tutor versions. But, yeah, I was a little bit sad after this. But luckily the deck bailed me out games 2 and 3. But yeah, as a DMT player and Depths player, Jason probably can feel how demoralizing it is there. Yeah, you think you potentially can win the next turn and you can't. All right, so this hand is pretty nuts, right? You have turn one Thoughtseize, turn two Shepherd Endurance, everything in the same hand. You essentially, this is our version of Dark Ritual Doomsday. So they force the negation pitching Brainstorm. So they're protecting their Doomsday obviously, and especially since it might be just be their permission might be dead anyways later on. Might as well do it early. So that makes sense. I actually sandbagged the Wasteland here, and I did this correctly, thankfully, in the top eight. Not top eight. In this round 9 by foreshadowing in the top 8, screwed us up against the Depths deck. So the reason why is I want them to go for the line, and then I can Wasteland, and then that's another piece of angle disruption they have to play around. I felt a little bit bad here because they were able to do everything in the same turn. I thought it was worth it, but I think with the Endurance in hand, it might be better just to go for the kill here with the Wasteland. I think, but we don't have a natural order, so that was my logic at least. So I feel okay still, like barring anything like Orm's chant. All right, so we have the Endurance. Yeah, so that's just game, right? Endurance and Trophy has really fixed this matchup post board. So we're on the draw now, which makes it harder. 5 lands you absolutely cannot. Even though we have A, and technically this can hit B, I don't think you can keep this hand. Alright, so this one is a lot better. I think this is not... Yeah, like... Yeah, it was almost through Thoughtseize, right? Like, so this I don't think is very obvious in terms of what to keep here on Immortal 6. Does chat want to chime in on what is the keep? So it's not very obvious, but actually I put the natural order back. And the logic is you want to go lead with Thoughtseize turn 1, turn 2 Collective Oof, and you need to be able to make sure you hit Oof on turn 2. So the natural order is awkward because you're actually not close to natural order anytime soon, and you can't afford to put away disruption. So it's really close actually between the Cradle and the natural order. Natural order has higher upside, so there's an argument to be made for that. But if you draw any payoff, the Cradle is pretty good too, and I think it's close. I ended up putting the natural order back, but it's highly possible the Cradle is the correct putback. And I actually think in hindsight, I kind of agree with Jason. So, but I went with the other line. This card, Cradle, is very tempting. I have definitely been, lured into the trap of keeping it when I shouldn't. Also punished here, right? You have the Reclaimer for the Cradle already. So they pitched the Personal Tutor, which is interesting. No, I definitely agree with, Twitch chat is always right? Like, I think pilot error here, I think that's a mistake, like misplay number 5 or whatever it is. So they are digging deep, and they seize the endurance. Here I'm running into days. Like I cannot allow my opponent to potentially just win through whatever right here. I gotta get this down, and not to mention like, um, if they daze this, so be it. Like they're gonna go back to 1 mana, and they've already forced earlier. They would have pitched daze. So the funny thing to keep in mind here is they thought Seize and Street Read twice. They already took themselves down to 12, right, with the fetching, and then I took them down to 10 with the Collector Oof. So keep that in mind. Yeah. So here, I want to make sure I have lethal next turn anyways because Reclaimer can get Wasteland to hit their land, and then I have exactly 6 damage. Oh, sick. That's good to hear, Andrew. So 35-15. I'm trying to do the percentage. Is that 70%? I think it is. That is a good win rate. So here I target the Wasteland. They're gonna cycle Edge of Autumn Response. That's not the end of the world because it means they potentially can't cycle into their pile on the next turn. And then we just have lethal here because of 6 damage, right? The trophy I was gonna save for post Doomsday, but because they have 3 lands here already. Well, which you can put. Well, it's kind of tough, right? Like we don't know. I would have to check his list, but we don't know if they have another swamp or something, where trophy would be a little awkward. But yeah. All right, top 8 now. So obviously can't keep this. I forgot what I put back, but I think it's like I think it was like a shepherd or something. I clicked through it too quickly. I didn't know what they were on. I actually thought they were on Delver just because I assumed everybody was on Delver. Here I'm leading with a shepherd because it's the worst creature in this matchup. I just assume it's gonna die. And then next turn I can just play out all my dorks. So that was kind of nuts. Like they had. So I think this is a mistake I made. I don't think it mattered in the long term. What I should have done here was because I kind of tunnel visioned into getting the endurance to block the Merit Lage. Yeah, it does double cleanly. That's a good point. Right, 50 matches to 100. What I should have done here was visionary and hope to draw into something relevant because I don't think it mattered, but I think getting endurance here and chump blocking for a turn is not a winning line. But that's what I ended up doing. I should have gotten visionary and saw if I draw something relevant because at the worst case, I can always just natural order for Archon to block. At least game 1. So yeah, I chumped there. Yeah, they beat me and then lost to Stefan. So again, this is like a losing line now, and I don't think it was the reason why I lost this game, but it definitely didn't help. I'm likely just dead anyways. So there's no top deck from here that wins, unfortunately. Yeah. That wasn't the throw though in this match. It's game 3. So here, kind of a sketch 7, but because it's 3 lands and if they actually hit the arbor, I mean, there's the Wildborn Preserver, I guess, but like, I just think the card is not that good in general. Like, I don't like very narrow targets, so to speak. I ended up keeping because I think this is just good enough. It's not great though. Yes, double plow would be a mess for this. Although, what I would do is I would lead with the arbor first. If they plow it, I'll do, depending on my drop, I'm gonna actually lead with a cradle second, and then the arbor the following turn. The reason why I sequence it that way is because you actually can cast your 1-drop and actually be floating, could be above water, so to speak, with cradle mana. Yeah, I kept this gross hand and won this game, believe it or not. It also helped they mode a 4 for whatever it's worth. I don't know if they were just missing land drops or whatnot, but uh, you will still. So something I want to point out. Actually, in my sideboard map, currently speaking, I actually don't even bring in Force of Vigor against them. I actually realized this while sideboarding that endurance. So this has to do with a conversation I had with Jarvis and York. York afterwards, to be honest. So when I talked to Jarvis, he actually he and I both independently came to the conclusion endurance is not that great out of elves against lands. And the logic for that is because if you're just using it to nuke alone, it's a 0 for 2. Like, you're down 2 cards, you didn't hit any of theirs. If you hit it, the lands in the yard. Oh yeah. That's what you mean, Luna. I thought you were talking about against this hand. Uh, so yeah, it's a 0 for 2 if you hit the loam. If you hit the loam, they can just redo it every turn, right? So we think that's a losing line, and chump blocking is not going to actually get you to win the game. So my initial board actually had endurance coming in for this matchup. I actually changed on the fly to bring the Force of Vigors because I realized and this is important to realize when, especially if your opponent is playing a strange deck or boarding very strangely, is to be able to adapt. Like, it's good to have the cheat sheet of how to board, but you need to be able to be flexible too. And that's what helped me win game 2 here. Like, bringing this in where the endurance is kind of bad. So here, pretty nice, right? Like, we go turn 2 Visionary because we want to dig for lands. Not to mention, yeah. So this is like the full blowout right here, right? We have the Force of Vigor for the Canonist and the Cage. I don't want to get no, it's not for the Saga. It's really because of Mox Diamond, Cage, sometimes Torpor Orb, just like random things. I mean, they happen to have Canonist here. This is like the full blowout, and I don't want to, have Corrupt Rotation save the Canonist with the Shijiri Steep. So I just do it here. The reason being is the Collective is likely dead anyways. And then we have a fast natural order, and then they just concede. Alright, we're going to see my punt job here pretty soon. Again, these 5 land hands cannot keep. This is close, I think. Obviously, you put the Progenitus back. I'm hoping they plow here, and I think they do. Oh no, never mind, they don't. So here, yeah. So they didn't plow, so maybe they just don't care about the heritage. I don't know. No, okay, there they plow. I don't know. Maybe they just drew it. Here we don't have a kill anytime soon, and I actually probably cost myself the game here because I think the correct line is just a visionary. It's kind of slow though. So I went for the more aggressive line and just waste their Savannah trying to cheese a win. And then Green Sun. I'd love to hear chat's thoughts on this, but if I were to do it again, I'd probably just play the Visionary. But it's a little bit slow. And I felt like we almost needed speed, and the Wasteland would set them back a turn. Hard to say if that's right or not. And then immediately punish, right? The Torpor Warp comes down. Actually, in hindsight, what I should have done there was because actually that's okay. I thought about maybe it's correct to block. Whoa, there you go. I held the Reclaimer here. Yeah, that's probably true, Andrew. It's hard to say because I wanted to like kind of leverage the Green Sun to try to get ahead on tempo, because although this matchup does get real grindy, so probably not worth it. I went for the cheese play, and that might have been the game right there, to be honest. All right, so they swords there. I don't do anything. Double Zenith. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Progenitus is how I win this game, at least without drawing the Assassin's Trophy or the Collector. I mean, the Force of Vigor. So we drew the natural order. The problem is now we don't have the mana. So I got the Heritage Druid here because I want to get the Progenitus next turn. The problem is there's a Dark Depths Merit Lage looming now, and now we're stuck on lands. Yeah, the awkward thing here is like, yeah. So here, I just think we need to get the orb off the board. So I actually pitched the natural order. So we're just dead here to the Merit Lage. And that's how our, you know, that's how our tourney run ends, unfortunately. It was good while it lasted. Uh, quick recap is we beat every blue deck and every dark ritual deck we played against. So, two dark ritual decks, the Reanimator and Doomsday. I think we beat 4 Delver decks. the irony, we lost to 2 crop rotation decks on the day. I think the lands matchup you were here earlier, probably winnable, and I'd probably punt it. But they also, were trying to give us the game too by some of their plays. So maybe that's an L regardless. This one, definitely the Wasteland is a punt. Whether it matters or not, it's hard to say. Somebody like Jason would be better, more equipped to weigh in on whether I would have been able to cobble up a Progenitor's kill in time or not. My suspicion is I'm probably still losing this match, but I haven't played this deck, specifically Depths, from that side enough to know what the counterplay is against an opposing Wasteland. And I don't know if me saving it would have been a big difference. So I'd love to hear if anybody has any opinions on that. It doesn't have to be Jason, obviously. It could be anybody who's played the deck or whatnot, or doesn't even have the...
Or maybe not necessarily played the deck, but essentially that's probably what decided the game. Game 1, I made the small mistake. I don't think it mattered. Game 2, they mold a 4, and I had like kind of the nuts for their hand. And then Game 3, it bore down to the Wasteland play. Did anybody have any comments for this game or in general?
What am I hearing? Anybody's... So Jason, what I asked was, does the Wasteland... No, I can't. I don't think I can do better because the knight is out. That's the real problem, Jason. I'm not Jason. Andrew. What was I gonna say? So Jason, I used my Wasteland early in the game. Without watching, it's hard to say, but there is a chance that maybe that affects the game, or maybe it doesn't, and I would lose anyways. But hard to say, right? Like I Wasteland on turn 2. They end up getting the Torpor Orb out, which is awkward, right? Because I wouldn't have to pitch the Visionary, and then I can save it and then Natural Order for Hoof. But that's a lot of ifs and whats, right? Because from the other side, Xeno Nono could have changed some of their plays too, to be fair. Like they use 1, 2, 3 Wasteland, they easily could have got the 4th. Yeah, so it's possible we punted, but it's hard to say, right? Like we don't know like how each side's gonna draw. Like a lot of lines change. It was a little bit unfortunate. Like I think this top 8 was stacked with blue decks, and the 2 green decks got paired against each other. That's part of it, though. Like I've definitely had my share of of good luck and good fortune. Especially in this tournament too, and just in the past, like the big event that I won last year, the showcase qualifier, I definitely got lucky there too with matchups. So, pretty happy overall. Like, I think Elves is like pretty well positioned at the moment. I think Lands is probably a hard matchup, and maybe something like Test or Show and Tell can be hard, but those tend to have harder Delver matchups from what I understand. Especially Show and Tell. I don't know about Test at the moment. Oops can be hard, especially right now. They are aware that we don't have Leyline. And I think in leagues, it might be safe to run like 2 Leylines or something. In addition to the Endurance package instead of the Force of Vigor. But Force of Vigor right now like pretty good, so... yeah, I mean, the thing... Yeah, in terms of the matchup, I think, like I said, Doomsday is a good matchup now. I think Lands is hard. Sneak is hard, but I don't think that deck is well positioned at all. So really, the only one I'm kind of scared of is Lands. If anybody's looking to pick up this deck, my advertising for it would be, I think
it is the anti-blue deck that, in my opinion, has the best combo matchup. So what I mean by that is, I think if you're expecting to play against Doomsday, which most people fear, I think Elves has the best game against Doomsday out of all of the anti-meta decks, so to speak. The green decks, lands, the Elves Reclaimer decks in lands, D&T, Elves, etc. Yeah, the reason why is because Sneak is just worse Doomsday, I think. Yeah, I don't think any of the fair decks. I think a good Delver player with Cyborg Hate will be probably significant against an average Elf player. Um, but I think a experienced Elf player can fight through the hate with this build. I think Endurance is very well positioned. It's good against Doomsday and it's good against Delver. I don't know enough about Loam to speculate on that. I suspect it's probably decent. Legacy Council. Only because Loam has traditionally played Leyline as well, so. Yeah, as currently constructed, Endurance is just absolutely nuts against Delver. And I went through it earlier, but we beat Delver 4 different times in this. And most of those games weren't really close. We probably should have lost the one where the aggro GG guy, but 8-1 overall. The thing about Saga package is it depends on what kind of hate, right? Like it's not good against like the Oops decks, but it's pretty good against Delver, I think. Unholy Heat is good, but it's not perfect. Because the Endurance decks tend to have Reclaimer as well. So, Bog is a thing. Not to mention, if they Endurance first, the Unholy Heat doesn't work. Or, well, let me rephrase that. If they haven't reloaded, so to speak. Excuse me. So, yeah, that I don't know if Jason caught it or not, but our magical ride, pun not intended, ended here against Depps, and then our opponent lost to Stefan, and then Stefan, I don't know who he beat in the finals, but so congrats again to Stefan, the winner of the first Eternal Weekend event, and then you're winning the second one. The third one is obviously tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific. But let me bring up the deck list again. So, anybody have any last questions? I think I enjoyed doing this tournament recap. Did everybody enjoy it? Any recommendations? Just let me know. Either on chat right now or just DM. Either way. I enjoyed it. This is my first time doing anything like this. I don't advertise this because I don't play challenges much. That's why I don't generally do these recaps because I don't play the challenges, but I think it was pretty useful, hopefully. Yeah, I agree with Jason. I was curious if it would have mattered or not based on how the game played out. I know you missed it earlier, and maybe it's a lot to ask to watch the replay, but um, what's it called? Like, I'd love to know if you think it would have mattered in the matchup. My guess is probably still lose, but it's a lot closer. Yeah, so first place take is a huge thing, right? Like, it's actually part of the reason why I didn't play last year's event. Also, last year's event, I was preparing for the modern mocks that I qualified for. Yeah, so that's the thing, right? I don't think the thing is like if I save the Wasteland, I probably
So it sounds like Jason, you believe that I would have lost anyways, which makes me feel better for what it's worth. But yeah, I would have to win through the what is that card? I would have to have won through the torpor orb, which I don't think is that easy. Present 2 stages before comboing. Yeah, I would imagine the sequencing changes a lot. Also, the visionary coming down earlier might have changed my clock a little bit faster too because well, I see a card deeper and then I can pitch to kill the torpor orb. But the thing is, like, it's just so far away. Most likely against that board state, I would have to um, not pitch the natural order in order to kill the torpor orb because then that means Hoof is lethal, right? And it's not necessarily even lethal because the knight is big. So yeah, pretty like yeah, the 60 is pretty solid. I think I'm playing like maximum fetches and minimum fetchables, which is 2 basics, 2 bayous, 2 forests. I mean two arbors. Some like the third like forest or the third bayou. I think it's largely not necessary. The games that go long, like you can just trade those in for like Kratos or Bog if need be with a reclaimer. And then I think the sideboard, like there's some play with the Force of Vigor and the Wasteland. Leagues definitely if they think if Oops is popular Reanimator, like I definitely would recommend like 2 ley lines or something to keep them honest. But I think the deck is like the best. It's probably been outside of maybe the Luris era, where a Luris for a Visionary is a lot better than Luris for a Bauble. Um, but that version was significantly worse against. So I think that version might have been the best against Delver because of Luris, but I think this version might be the best against combo it's ever been, for what it's worth. Because really, what like even your fair cards, which is like Endurance and Assassin's Trophy, like they're combo hate, right? This is Stone Rain. This is what's it called Graveyard Hate and Doomsday Hate. All right, let's see who's streaming right now. I guess Legacy. How long do you think you learn Elves? It depends. I've had people learn it within a week. So Jorg, would message me every day when he picked up the deck, and same thing with Levi. If people know who Levi is, and they were able to pick up the deck within a week, but they had played crop rotation decks before.